Ladies and gentlemen, anything to report from the lunch break? All right. We will resume with Sergeant Meany's testimony. And Mr. Matthews?
Thank you, Your Honor. Sergeant, you testified, I believe, that you've been with the LMPD for 8 years, correct?
Correct.
Did you have any law enforcement experience prior to that?
No, sir.
Okay, so when did you attain the rank of sergeant?
Goodness, it was just, I believe that year, so CID merged in November of that year. I believe it was a couple months prior.
I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up so everybody can hear you, okay? A couple months prior to what?
When narcotics and Ninth Mobile combined.
Okay. What I would like to do with you is try to give the ladies and gentlemen of the jury some understanding of the layout of the LMPD.
Certainly.
You've referenced to narcotics and CID. Are those two separate units?
So at one point they were. Narcotics was its own separate unit, and Ninth Mobile, which worked primarily violent crime, was a separate unit. When they merged and became the Criminal Interdiction Division, it more or less brought narcotics and violent crime together.
Okay, so CID stands for Criminal Interdiction Division, correct?
Yes, sir.
And within CID, is my understanding correct that there are different units?
That's correct.
Do you know how many?
You have major case narcotics, you have interdiction, which works parcels and packages, that sort of thing, as well as the highway. At one point, the point at which I was there, it was 2 street squads that worked narcotics, 2 violent crime squads, a prescription pill unit, and then PBI.
Okay, and is everybody that is connected with CID a rank of detective or higher?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Do you know how many officers are assigned to CID?
I do not.
I mean, is it 10 or 20 or 40?
At one point, there was as many as, I believe, like 60 detectives.
And how about you've got CID, and you mentioned different squads. Are there same individuals assigned to each squad?
So, as far as...
Well, I mean, like you mentioned interdiction. It works on the highway and
Correct.
goes, I guess, looks at packages at the airport, correct? Are those all the same guys all the time?
For the most part, yes, that's correct. And I mean, you can move in between units when the opportunity presents itself, but that would require a vacancy more or less to be open.
Right. So you mentioned PBI. That stands for Place-Based Investigations.
That's correct.
And was that a relatively new unit that was created within CID?
It was.
Were you placed in charge of that?
Yes, sir.
When did that happen?
So, I think CID became a thing in November of the year prior. So November, towards the end of November.
Of what year are we talking? The incident that brings us here occurred in March 2020.
So it would have been 19, sorry.
2019?
Yeah.
That's when PBI was formed at the end of, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And what was the purpose of PBI?
So place-based investigations more or less took information that came from the Crime Information Center. It was based on reports of violent crime, that sort of thing, more or less hotspot style policing. So it looked at those areas and then looked at targeted enforcement in those areas.
And when you say at hot spots in those areas, what are we talking about? A couple blocks, a
It could be
square
a couple
mile?
blocks. It could be, for us, it was Broadway from 24th to 28th, and then from Broadway north to, I believe, Magazine, if I remember correctly. That same block radius, so 24th to 28th.
And is Elliott Avenue located within that block?
Yes, sir, it is.
And was that the only investigation PBI was conducting at the time?
No. So we had multiple different investigations that we were working within kind of that general area.
And the concept was that you discovered a target or something and went after, tried to build a case?
Yeah, so basically discover what they called a micro cell, a cell that was responsible for criminal behavior, and then you would work a case towards trying to more or less take the cell down and its key players.
And then move on to something else, correct? And is that, you mentioned Jamarcus Glover in your direct testimony. Is that where Jamarcus Glover came into the picture?
That's correct.
And how did he fit in?
So I would say that Jamarcus was fairly high up within the trafficking organization that they had going on Elliott.
And if I understand things correctly, the trafficking organization on Elliott was operating out of 3 houses, correct?
That's correct.
2 of them right next door to each other and 1 across the street, correct?
That's correct.
So a decision was made to target those houses?
Yes, to specifically target the drug trafficking organization that was operating out of those locations.
And how did you develop that kind of information?
So that information was developed based upon the initial CIC assessment, which provides the hotspot, and then more or less it's going out and looking at reports from the area, just criminal behavior. The location itself, 2424 Elliott, was a known spot that had been a problem previously for the 1st Division. Same sort of thing, drug trafficking out of the location.
Does your unit put up pole cameras and send people out to surveil the place and so on?
Yes, sir.
And is that done pretty frequently?
Yes.
Okay, and then you mentioned you identified some photographs that showed Jamarcus Glover at 3003 Springfield Drive, correct? How did that come about?
So that came about, that was Detective Janes and Detective Goodlett were surveilling the location that day. I can't remember if they followed him out there based on the tracker that was on the vehicle, or if they had just ended up out there doing surveillance and he happened to be there. But those photos were taken by Detective Goodlett and Detective Janes that day.
Well, how did 3003 come on the radar of PBI for this investigation?
Specifically when he went in and out of the location, and if
Refer to he, you're talking about Jamarcus Glover,
Yes, sir,
correct?
that's correct.
And in and out of the location at what, 3003 Springfield?
That's correct.
Okay. What was he doing there, if you know?
That we don't know. We know that he came out with a package, or that day, obviously, he came out with a package. I know the other instances in which Detective Janes found we use databases that are commonly used by law enforcement, and that address came up underneath Mr. Glover as a known address or used address.
And when you say 3003 as a known address, are you referring specifically to apartment 4?
Yes, sir.
And that was Breonna Taylor's apartment?
Yes, sir.
Did you develop any information connecting Jamarcus Glover and Breonna Taylor?
So I know that we had Mrs. Taylor's car down on Elliott Avenue on pole camera as well. And I know that when they served a subpoena on Mr. Glover's bank account, that the address that was listed under that account was also 3003 Springfield Drive.
Okay. And based on all the information and intelligence that you gathered, you decided to get search warrants, correct?
Correct.
And how many search warrants were obtained?
Let's see here. I believe a total of 5.
And there would have been 3 on Elliott, 1 on Springfield, and 1 over on Muhammad Ali, correct?
Correct.
And those were all part of the same investigation.
That's correct.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury briefly what the process is to obtain a search warrant?
Yeah, so as you are building your investigation, you identify the location itself that you're looking to search, the reason for which you're looking to search it, and then you start naming specific factual pieces of evidence that would lead you to believe that the items related to what you're searching for would be found at that location based upon the probable cause that you provided in the affidavit.
And you put all that information in writing and take it to a judge, correct? And if the judge is satisfied that it's a valid affidavit and the information is legit, or arises to the level of probable cause, the judge will sign the search warrant,
That's
correct?
correct.
So in this case, you got 5 search warrants.
Yes, sir.
What were you specifically looking for at 3003 Springfield Drive, apartment 4?
We believe that there was probably going to be narcotics and/or proceeds from narcotics, so currency at that location.
And, okay, so when you get, once you get the search warrant, what happens next?
So more or less, you start the process of just trying to gather all the information and individuals who are going to assist with serving the warrants.
You don't just go out and
No, sir.
go bust in the place, correct?
Correct.
I've heard the term matrix. Can you tell us what a matrix is?
Yeah, so matrix, more or less, you're looking at the different factors that would establish a level of risk at a location, and it tries to identify a certain number and whether it's in a threshold that an investigative unit can handle it versus SWAT.
What type of risk factors are you looking at?
It could be anything from previous violent criminal history to narcotics activity, weapons factors, that sort of thing.
So is this like a form that somebody fills out
That's correct.
and you score points for different things, correct?
Yes, sir.
And my understanding is if the point level gets to a certain level, then CID people couldn't go out and do it by themselves, is that correct? That requires SWAT to become involved?
That's correct.
Okay, and before a search warrant is served, does somebody go out and look at the location physically and gather information about the layout of the place and who might be present and that sort of thing?
Typically, yes, we try to make sure that we spend some time surveilling each location, get an idea of obviously what it looks like so that we can provide it to the team that is serving the warrant.
Okay, and was that done at 3003 Springfield Drive?
I know photos were taken of the front door and of the front of the location.
But you don't know about anything around the back or the rest of the layout of the building?
Outside of that, I do not know. I can't.
Do you know if a matrix was prepared for that location?
There was.
And who prepared that?
Detective Wes Barton.
And when was that prepared?
That was prepared the morning of the warrant service, I believe.
If the warrant was served on, right after midnight on March 13th, is it your testimony that the matrix was prepared on March the 12th?
That's correct.
And what happens once that's prepared?
So once it's prepared, it more or less is approved, and you begin the process of establishing who's going to serve the warrant at a location and kind of come up with a roster, more or less.
Okay, well, we saw a photograph of a whiteboard. That was taken from a whiteboard where?
That is in the conference room in the office where CID is located.
So the warrant on Springfield was going to be served by CID, correct?
Correct.
And that's because the matrix score didn't get high enough to get SWAT involved?
Correct.
And the other 4 search warrants were supposed to be served by SWAT, correct?
That's correct.
When SWAT gets involved, what happens?
So we met with them, I believe, a week prior to warrant service and just kind of went over the specific locations and everything that we had related to the investigation and more or less get their feedback on how they want to proceed.
And did SWAT tell you that trying to do 5 search warrants simultaneously is crazy? That we can't do it?
I know we specifically talked about the ones that we were going to have them serve, which was the Elliott locations and the Ali location specifically, that those 2 would be a challenge. So we did adjust that evening for those 2 locations as far as what we were going to do.
Did the SWAT people even know that Springfield was still on the radar and going to be served that night?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, sir.
Okay. But they were not consulted with reference to Springfield, correct?
I know the day that we met with them, we talked about multiple different addresses, and I know that Detective Janes ended up sending them an email with correspondence as it related to the locations.
When you obtain a search warrant, you've got an option to ask for a no-knock warrant, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury exactly what a no-knock warrant is?
Yeah, so a no-knock warrant is essentially you're going to the location, and rather than knocking and announcing presence, you have authority via the warrant with the exception that is written into the warrant that you can force entry upon making it to the door.
And why would you want a no-knock warrant?
So typically you do that in instances where you're concerned that somebody might destroy evidence, conceal stuff, if they're violent individuals, that sort of thing.
And a no-knock warrant was sought and granted for 3003 Springfield, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you've got the 5 warrants issued. You're gonna go do them sometime around midnight on March the 13th or 12th, going into the 13th. What happens after those warrants are issued?
So after the warrants were issued, we briefed that evening. That's
Is my understanding correct that there were 2 separate briefings?
correct.
One was at CID at your conference room. Were you present at that one?
I was.
Okay, and then there was a separate briefing at SWAT for the other 4 locations, correct?
That's correct.
And at the briefing, at the briefing at CID, the whiteboard had rosters for each one of the locations, correct?
Correct.
So is my understanding correct that when SWAT is involved, SWAT goes in and makes the entry into the address you're going to search, they secure everything, and then CID or whoever's performing the actual search comes in and does the search, is
That's
that right?
correct.
Okay. On Springfield, there wasn't gonna be any SWAT though, it's gonna be CID guys just go in and do it.
Correct.
So you've got, on the whiteboard, you've got 5 different addresses with a list of police officers or detectives who are going to go to each one of those locations, correct?
Yes, sir.
How was that made up?
So I know we initially sent out an email asking for volunteers, and then really it was just kind of plugging in people into different places, making sure that we had a K-9 that was available at each of those locations.
And was that roster made up that night, or was it as people volunteered to do it?
It was that evening or that night.
Okay, and do you know Brett Hankison?
I do, during the period that we worked together.
Okay. And is my understanding correct that he volunteered to participate in the execution of these search warrants?
Yes, sir, he did.
And he is a K-9 officer, correct?
That's correct.
He has a dog, do you know his dog's name?
Franklin.
And what does Franklin do?
Franklin searches for narcotics.
And is that all Franklin does?
That I don't know. I know that Franklin was pretty good at finding currency as well.
But he's not a dog that goes out
No, sir.
and tracks people or does crowd control or anything like that,
No,
correct?
sir.
So Officer Hankison volunteered, and he is the K-9 officer assigned to do Springfield, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was he, when he volunteered to do Springfield, do you know whether, was he on duty at that time, or was this off duty?
I can't remember if he was on duty or off duty. I don't know that.
Okay, as the K-9 officer, does he have any other role in the service of the search warrant?
Typically, because of the way that the units worked and they worked so often with one another, a lot of the guys that are K-9 handlers are former narcotics detectives. So typically they were involved in warrant service, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, and to your knowledge, was Detective Hankison a former narcotics officer before he became a K-9?
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
And when you say typically guys work together, my understanding is that these different groups that were going to these different addresses were just kind of put together. They weren't regular units that worked together all the time. Is that correct?
Work together in the sense that lots of times when we had multiple things going on, it was very common for units to work and ask for help from one another.
Okay, well, is a unit kind of like a team? You get to know each other and you know what each other does, what each one does, and you each have a role, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was that the case with these units that were put up on the whiteboard for March 12th?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody worked well together and they were pretty cohesive.
Okay. At the briefing, who conducted that briefing before Springfield?
It was Detective Barton.
And was there any discussion about, I may have covered this, but was there any discussion about how Springfield was laid out?
I don't recall if there was anything specific about how it was laid out, other than, like I said, the photos of the front.
Of the front? And another thing that is my understanding is that once the briefing is conducted, everybody gets together and goes somewhere close to the location and you kind of muster up there, correct?
Correct.
Before that happens, what is a VO?
Verification officer.
What does the verification officer do?
Verification officer is typically the person who is already on scene, who's conducting surveillance, that can let us know that if anything changes during the course of between brief to getting to the location, they can kind of more or less put that information out on the radio. Also, the purpose of the verification officer is to verify that it is the correct location.
Okay, and is the verification officer also called the eyes?
That's correct.
Because he's got his eyes on the location, correct?
Exactly.
Was there a verification officer assigned to 3003 Springfield?
Yes, sir.
And that was Mike Campbell, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know when Mike Campbell went to Springfield?
I believe it was like 9 p.m. I don't know if it was earlier than that or later than that, but it should have been about 9.
And what is he supposed to do? Just sit there and watch the comings and goings at the apartment?
More or less, get eyes on the location and update if there's any change at the location.
And where were you when all this was going on?
I was at the CID office.
Okay, did you ever leave CID and go out to Elliott or go to Springfield?
Did not go to Springfield, and we had the camera on Elliott, so it made it easier to keep eyes on that location the entire time.
So you watched it on a video, correct? Okay. To your knowledge, did Mike Campbell report anything back to the officers who were going to execute the search warrant on
My
Springfield?
knowledge.
That things had changed?
No, sir.
Okay, there was never any notification given to your knowledge that a individual had pulled up in a large SUV and parked right in front of this
I'm gonna
entranceway?
object to the hearsay.
Come, approach, please.
Okay, so Sergeant Meany, to your knowledge, the search warrant was the officer showed up and we're supposed to go execute the search warrant, right?
That's correct. It's like you said, they mustered up. I just don't know where at prior to.
Okay, and you didn't have anything to do with what occurred at Springfield, is that right?
No, sir.
When did you first learn that something had happened?
Over the radio.
Okay, and how about at some point, the no-knock warrant issued for Springfield was changed to a knock-and-announce warrant. Tell the jury what a knock-and-announce warrant is.
So a knock and announce is you knock on the door, you announce your presence, you wait a reasonable amount of time before you can force entry into the location.
And do you know who made the decision to change Springfield from a no-knock to a knock-and-announce?
So ultimately, the entire time, I think we planned that it was going to be a knock and announce at that location, just because the matrix was lower on the risk score. The need for SWAT was at the other locations due to the different factors that we had there, including the number of people. And ultimately, what I'm saying is we planned it to be a knock and announce.
Why did you get a no-knock then?
So when we met with SWAT, they initially asked for all the warrants as it related to this case to be no-knocks. So when Detective James went and sought them, that was included in each of them.
Okay, so sometime prior to going to Springfield, this was changed at Springfield to a knock-and-announce, correct?
We briefed it as a knock and announce. That's correct.
And when you say we briefed it, who briefed it?
Detective Barton.
Okay. And the matrix score there on Springfield was low enough that you could cut SWAT out of the picture, correct?
Correct.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor? Sergeant, on the whiteboard picture that you have, where it describes the address on Springfield, can you read what that says?
Above it,
Well, just the numerals in front of Springfield.
3003 Springfield.
Okay, is that clear to you, or does it look like 3007?
It could be interpreted as a 7. I could see that.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Redirect.
Now, you stated that the warrants on Elliott were executed by SWAT,
That's correct.
and you were present at Elliott, or one of those.
Yes, ma'am.
And was Jamarcus Glover located at Elliott on one of the searches on Elliott?
That's correct, he was.
And is that why those were higher risk?
So those were higher risk due to the number of people that were typically encountered at that location. I know at one point, one of the locations had long guns that were recovered from there. And yeah, just the different factors with the number of people that you were usually encountered there.
And there was no such indication of any urgency or danger on Springfield?
No, ma'am.
And was there any knowledge that another male was living at Apartment 4 Springfield?
To my knowledge, no, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anything else?
May I ask just one more, Judge?
Sure.
Sergeant, do you know if the search warrant on Springfield was ever actually served by CID? The apartment was ever searched by CID?
So no, we never actually got out there to search the apartment.
And Franklin never came out of his car and went in at any time, correct? Thank you.
To my knowledge.
Anything else of this witness? You may step down, thank you. All right, your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, it's going to be Detective Mike Nobles.
Okay. take a seat, please? And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
May I leave my mask on or off?
You may, you can take it off while you're testifying.
Thank you, Judge. You okay? Yeah. All right. Can you go ahead and tell the jury your name, please?
Mike Nobles,
And where do you currently work?
Louisville Metro Police Department's Criminal Interdiction Unit,
And how long have you been with LMPD?
15 years.
15 years? And then you just described the unit that you're assigned to. How long have you been with that unit?
Since 2017.
And just so that we kind of get to know you a little bit better, where are you originally from? You from Louisville, somewhere else?
Just outside Louisville.
Just outside Louisville. And you've described yourself as obviously being a police officer for quite some time. What training did you have or receive before becoming a police officer?
Well, I joined the police department in 2006. Went to their academy class, and then in the 15 years that I've been a police officer, I've attended several training for different positions on the department.
All right. And I'm going to go forward and go to March 12th or the early morning hours of March 13th of 2020. Were you working as a police officer then?
Yes.
And what unit were you assigned to? The same unit?
Yeah, I'm assigned to the airport parcel interdiction unit.
Okay. And within that unit, what do you do on a daily basis?
I interdict packages from different parcel carriers located here in Louisville.
And on those early morning hours of March 13th of 2020, what was your assigned role or what were you doing on that assigned day?
Well, in the evening of March 12th, well, during the day of March 12th, I was contacted to see if I was available for a search warrant that night, that evening,
And how were you contacted?
by my sergeant,
Okay, and who would that be?
Sergeant John Manley.
Okay. Now, when you get contacted, is this a voluntary thing?
It absolutely was. I was out of town when he called me.
Okay. And so you received the email. What'd you do next?
It was a phone call.
Phone call. And,
I agreed and told him, yes, I would. It wasn't until that evening.
okay. So going forward to that evening, when did you first meet up or get to that assignment?
We met at the office, 7th and Ormsby, later on in the evening, 9 or 10 o'clock, I believe, is when the meeting was to go over the warrants.
Okay. And what office was that?
That's our CID's office.
CID office.
701 West Ormsby.
Okay. Who all was there when you got to CID?
There was a lot of detectives, sergeants.
Okay. Particularly when you get there, who's going to give the briefing that night?
Well, I know that the warrant was for the PBI, PBL unit,
Okay.
whoever was going to be in charge of that.
Okay.
One of the detectives on that unit.
Okay. Now, when you attend this briefing, you're not giving it, you're just receiving. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the details of that briefing or what you were briefed on that evening before you left?
I was assigned to the Springfield address.
Do you know approximately what time you left that briefing?
It was after 10 p.m.
Okay. Do you remember anything about the type of briefing that you received or the type of warrant that you would be performing that night?
Yeah, it was a knock and announce warrant. We were there just to look for mail matter, anything linking the
Okay.
main suspect.
Okay. Do you remember what time you left?
It was after, the meeting was 10. I'm not sure what time we left.
Okay. Where did you go first after the meeting?
We went and met at the church at St. Andrew's Church Road.
Okay. And is that in close proximity to 3003 Springfield Drive?
Yes.
Okay. Why is it that you meet there prior to going to the address on the warrant?
Because we were told we're not gonna execute that warrant until the main suspect was in custody.
Okay. Do you remember who the main suspect was at that time?
Jamarcus Glover.
Okay. Now, when you get to the church parking lot as you described, do you remember who was there
At
at the meeting point?
all the detectives that were on my team.
Okay. Do you remember who was on the team with you, if you could name them?
Yeah. There was Sergeant Mattingly, there's Brett, Tony James, Miles Cosgrove, Mike Campbell, Sean Hoover. I think that's it.
Okay. So you all meet there. Is there anyone else staging there with you?
EMS.
Okay. Is that typical? Why, and why is that?
We always, if you're gonna do a warrant, you wanna have EMS close by in case something does happen.
Okay. So you all stage. Do you remember what you do next?
We waited for the phone call. We waited for the call to give the go to Springfield.
Okay. Do you remember if there were any assignments given that night amongst your team that you just mentioned? Particular roles, unit?
Yeah.
What were you assigned to?
My role was the ram,
Okay.
to be the ram of the door.
Okay. And just so that the jury knows, what's the approximate weight of a ram?
50, 60 pounds.
Okay. Are you able to be armed while you have that ram?
No.
Okay. What position would you be within the team as a ram? Would you be front, back?
I'd be the very front.
Okay. Do you remember if anybody else had assigned roles that evening within that group?
Sergeant Manley was the point. Mike Campbell was the VO, verification officer. The rest of the guys lined up behind us.
Okay. And you met up, you got your assigned roles. What did you do next?
Sergeant Manley received a phone call that the warrants were being executed on Elliott. Once those were executed, we were given the go to go ahead to Springfield.
Do you remember anything about getting to Springfield, the arrival? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, we drove. Each of us drove our vehicles into the parking lot. When we arrived, we parked short of the apartment. There was a white SUV that was parked in the middle of the parking lot that wasn't a police officer. We didn't know whose it was. Once we parked there, we got out and we lined up.
Okay. Now, you said you didn't recognize one of the vehicles. Was that in your briefing or was that new to you?
It was new to us.
Did that change your demeanor in any way, or what'd you do?
Well, we still have the apartment that we had to approach. Nobody was in the vehicle, but yeah, it was new to us. It was something new that wasn't there in prior drive-throughs.
Okay. So what do you do next?
We were lined up on the sidewalk and we walked into the little hallway area, first floor,
Okay.
bottom floor. Approached the door.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibits 19 and 5 and have you take a look at these. Detective Noble, what are those pictures depicting right there?
That's the entranceway to Springfield, and that the door is the target door.
Okay. And what's the other photo? Is that the door?
Yes.
And are those a fair and accurate representation of the night when you, or the night and of the apartment door location when you arrived on that search warrant at 3003 Springfield Drive?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would move to admit those two into evidence as 19 and 5.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
They'll be so admitted.
At this time, Your Honor, I'm going to display them for the jury on the screen.
That's fine.
Okay, Detective Nobles, I'm going to give you a laser pointer. point out in the photo that I'm going to show you in a second where you were when you actually arrived and walked to the scene that you just described. Where are you in this picture?
Underneath the steps, right next to the door.
Okay, and you're first in line, you said?
Once we get to the door, I'm on the right side of the door. Sergeant Manley is on the left side of the door. And I know that Miles was in between us, more behind Sergeant Manley.
Okay, you said Miles, is that Detective Cosgrove?
Yes.
Where is everyone else assigned, or where are they lined up?
They're stacked up behind Miles up into this corner and then coming back around.
Okay, do you know where each position of the individuals were?
I don't.
Okay. Who was up near the door right in your area?
Sergeant Manley and Detective Cosgrove.
Okay. Could you see above you? What was your viewpoint?
I knew that there was a second floor deck, the stairs going up.
Okay. When you approached this area, did you notice anything about the surrounding apartments?
No.
Okay. What was the lighting at that time?
It was like a porch light. It wasn't well lit, but it was lit.
Was it light, dark?
It was light.
Light,
Bright, but it was light enough to see everything.
okay. And was this at midnight? So in terms of the sky, was it dark?
Yes.
Okay. Could you see into that apartment right there, the sliding glass window in the picture?
No.
Okay. Could you see into the door that you are now in front of?
It was closed.
Okay. When you're standing there, do you ever hear any type of commotion, noise, or are you just focused on the door? What's going on?
When we first approach the door, we do knock on the door, and a gentleman from upstairs comes out and starts to yell at us, telling us to leave, and, you know, he didn't have very nice words to say.
Now, when you say somebody above, could you see them?
I could just hear him.
You could hear them, okay? Was this after or before you knocked?
It's after.
How many times do you think you knocked?
4 or 5. I mean, it was a hard knock.
4 or 5, okay. Did you all announce?
Yes.
What did you say when you announced?
Police.
Okay. Do you know how many times you announced your presence at this address?
I don't. It's habit for when you approach a door is when you're knocking, you're yelling police.
Okay. At what point does the person come out that you just described when you were knocking?
Almost immediately after the first set of knocks.
Okay. Did this cause a change to your plan at all?
Absolutely.
Why? Go ahead and explain that to us.
Because it took Detective Hankison and Lieutenant Hoover's concentration off of the door, and they started to deal with this gentleman to help try to coerce him back inside. We were still standing by the door. Sergeant Manley and I continued to knock on that door while they were trying to coerce this man to go back in.
Was Detective Hankinson speaking with the gentleman upstairs?
I can hear him talking to him, yeah.
Okay. At some point, does anyone in your team, besides Detective Hankinson, engage with the neighbor upstairs?
Lieutenant Hoover.
Okay. What happens next after that engagement?
While they're still in engagement, Sergeant Manley and I are still knocking on the door. The gentleman finally goes inside. While we're knocking on the door, I can hear somebody inside. I know that Sergeant Manley had told me to go ahead and hit it. I said, I hear somebody, so we did another set of knocks. There was no answer, so I was given the go to go ahead and hit the door.
Okay, now I'm going to show you what we just mentioned as this picture right here, which is the door. Where are you when you just described that movement of getting ready to knock and now getting ready to ram? Where are you?
Right here.
Okay, and where is everyone else in that doorway?
Sergeant Manley's right here,
Okay,
and I know that Miles is right here behind him.
okay,
I don't know the line.
okay.
I don't know what order everybody else was in.
Now, when you start to do the ram, how are you taught to do a ram? What point of contact are you trying to reach? Does that make sense? What point of contact are you trying to bring the ram to the door? On the hinge side?
My point of contact is to try to open that door as fast as possible.
Is it on the doorknob side or the hinge side?
Doorknob side,
And on this door, where is the doorknob side?
right side,
Okay? How many times do you estimate you rammed that door?
3 times.
3 times? And on the third time, what happened?
It flew open.
And it flew open in the direction that the door is currently positioned?
Yes.
Okay? Now, this next part I know may not be easy. You ram the door, it opens. What happened next?
As soon as it opened, Sergeant Manley took a half a step inside. The only thing I saw disappear into that apartment from my view was his elbow in, holding the gun. He started yelling, "No, no, no." Took a shot to the groin, and he stepped back, and he just started to fire.
Where are you when this is happening?
Right here by the door, I didn't even have time to drop the ram.
Okay? What happens next?
I dropped the ram. Sergeant Manley is standing on this rug area in the doorway, shooting. He's in pain. He goes down right in here. Miles Cosgrove steps over top of him while he's still in this fatal funnel and starts shooting while John gets out of the way. John knows he's shot.
You just mentioned a term, fatal funnel. What does that mean?
It's when a fatal funnel is when you're standing in a light where if you're in a dark area and somebody's standing in a doorway with light behind them, you can see them, but they can't see you.
Could you ever see in that door?
No,
Was it black?
it's dark.
You said that you were obviously with the ram and you hadn't even gotten out of the way. What happens next for you?
Well, with all the, I don't know how many shots, I didn't count how many shots Sergeant Manley had taken, nor Miles, but it sounded, in that area, the echo was extremely loud. Knowing that John was shot from inside that apartment, I didn't know what was inside and if there was gonna be any bullets flying through. I just ducked down and tried to come back toward the back of the staircase. Until I looked back and saw John, I tried to get him out of the way because he was down right there in the middle of the door.
Okay. Were you armed when any of this was going on?
No. I had a pistol, but it wasn't out of holster.
Did you ever draw your pistol at any point?
No.
And why is that?
It happened so fast.
Okay. At any time, did you identify any target?
I never saw anybody. I never looked inside the apartment.
What happens next in terms of what I think you described as you were trying to help John? What do you do there?
Once everybody cleared out, John stood up, we grabbed him, Lieutenant Hoover grabbed him, I grabbed his other side, and we ran out of that area, and we took cover behind that white SUV that was parked out in front of the apartment.
Okay. The time that you just described in that doorway, was Detective Hankison ever in the doorway with you?
I don't recall.
You pull Detective Mattingly from that area. What do you all do next?
Take him behind the white SUV, and we lay him down beside the driver's side, the front driver tire, because we still think that there's a shooter inside. We rip Mattingly's pants at the leg. Lieutenant Hoover removes his belt, and we use that as a tourniquet.
So
We tended to John's wounds.
tended to his wounds. At some point, are you able to evacuate Detective Mattingly from that area?
We picked him up and put him on the trunk of a vehicle, and I drove it down to the bottom of the hill where Lieutenant Hoover picked him up and put him in the ambulance.
Okay. Do you remember ever seeing Detective Hankison render aid to Detective Mattingly?
I just saw Tony James, Sean Hoover, and John Mattingly.
Okay. What do you do next after you've rendered aid and loaded him up?
Told John I'd follow him to the hospital. Well, he asked me to follow him to the hospital, so once he was in the wagon, I ran back to my truck and made sure that I was right behind the EMS.
Okay. You arrived at the hospital. How long were you there?
An hour.
Okay. Where did you go next?
While I was at the hospital, PIU, Public Integrity Sergeant, had told me to head on to the office,
Okay. And where did you go?
the PIU office on Taylor Boulevard.
Okay. Why do you all go to PIU after an incident?
It's where they do a debrief. You have to speak with, it's where we meet the lawyer, and then you have to give a statement.
Okay. Is that protocol?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless told otherwise, that they tell you to come back.
At any point when you were still on the scene that night, did you ever see Detective Hankison take a shot in terms of shooting his own weapon?
I did not.
Never at the door?
I did not know that Brett shot.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I know that was hard, so thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Back on March 13th, were you detective or sergeant?
Detective?
And are you sergeant now?
No, sir.
But still detective, okay. I wasn't sure if I heard the beginning here. You've been with LMPD for 15 years, correct?
Going on 15, yes.
And how long have you been with CID?
2017, I want to say, in summer 2017.
Is that when CID was first formed?
No, it was Metro Narcotics at the time.
Okay.
And while we were in Metro Narcotics, about a year and a half in, they switched it to Criminal Interdiction Unit.
Have you known Brett for a great part of your career?
Known him since the day I came on.
Okay. And would you classify yourselves as friends?
Absolutely.
Good. Now, your role with CID, as I understand CID, there's different little units, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're with the airport parcel interdiction unit.
Yes.
Does that mean you spend all your time at the airport, or how does that work?
80% of my time at all the different parcel places in Louisville. Post office, FedEx, UPS.
And what do you do?
We look for suspect parcels,
Are there a lot of those that come through here?
unfortunately.
Okay, you indicated that on March 12th you were on vacation somewhere, correct? Or,
March 12th, I was on my way back from Washington, D.C.
and you received a call from John Mattingly asking you if you wanted to work over or be part of this search team?
Yes, sir.
And you agreed to do it, correct?
Yes, sir.
You were given a time to report to the CID office,
Yes, sir.
and you didn't do anything before that, correct?
Yes, I did.
What'd you do before that?
6 p.m. I had a meeting. At 6 p.m. I had a meeting at UPS ground with Sergeant Mattingly and the other detective that I work with.
Did that have anything to do with the search
Had
warrants?
nothing to do with this search warrant.
Okay.
I had other duties to do when I got back in town.
Okay. What time did you report to CID to do this search warrant detail?
It was between 9 and 10. It was at night.
You indicated there were quite a few detectives there,
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir.
and when you got there, did you know you were assigned to the 3003 Springfield location, or how did that come about?
Well, once we went into the meeting room and I looked at the board, I saw that my name was spelled wrong on that board, but I figured that was supposed to be me anyway, so.
And somebody made that assignment, they didn't ask you if that's where you wanted to go, they just made that assignment, okay. You indicated that, well, at the briefing, what was the description about 3003 Springfield that you were provided? Or were you given any information about that location?
Other than a female and a possible younger sibling. It was just there because that's where Jamarcus Glover usually laid his head and was seen going there numerous times.
Were you given any details about the physical layout?
No.
Okay. And did you know originally that it was a no-knock warrant that you were supposed to execute?
No. I just figured it was a knock and announce, which,
I mean, did anybody tell you that, or did you just see it written on the board, or?
I saw knock and announce.
Okay,
Which is the difference between a no knock and a knock and announce is a difference of about 15 seconds.
okay. Explain that a little bit.
A no-knock warrant is you can approach the door and just knock it in. You don't have to announce, it's a no-knock, it's supposed to be an element of surprise. Knock and announce, you have to announce yourself. If nobody answers, then you can go in.
Okay, so you all, I think you said you met at the church lot at St. Andrews,
Yes,
and then everybody drove, individually up to the Springfield apartment?
yes, sir.
After you received word from over on Elliott that it was time to go, correct?
Yes, Sergeant Manley was the point of contact, so he's the one that made the call and told us to mount up and go.
Okay, and when you got up to Springfield, how did that work? Everybody just find a place to park and park?
We were all lined up coming to the parking lot, and we stopped shy of the apartment, all lined up, and we got out and made our way onto the sidewalk and lined up.
If I understand correctly, Mike Campbell was already there as the eyes, correct?
He was a VO, yes.
And did he report anything to you before you got there about anything unusual or any changes?
He would have reported to John, and John didn't say anything.
Okay. You mentioned, I thought, I heard you say something about, you took a look at a building on a prior drive-through?
I didn't.
Okay.
John Manley did.
John Mattingly did?
He did a drive-through while we were at the parking lot.
Just by himself?
Yeah, when we were waiting, I think he did a drive-through just to see that layout.
And was it your understanding that Mike Campbell was up there at that time?
Yes,
Okay. So you all get up there and you see the big white SUV parked right in front of where you want to go in, is that right?
yes, sir.
Did that alter the plans at all or cause anybody any concern, to your knowledge?
It raised concern, but it didn't alter the plans. We didn't know if the car was involved in that apartment or not.
And you testified it was unoccupied, correct?
Correct.
So was there anybody around as you all approached the apartment?
Nobody was around.
Okay. And then you testified at some point somebody came out from an upstairs apartment, correct?
Correct.
When was that in the whole sequence?
He heard us knocking and announcing on that door, and he came outside to tell us to leave that girl alone.
Okay. You just indicated that the difference between a no-knock and a knock and announce is 15 seconds. Was that what you waited before you used the RAM, or was
We
it
waited at least I would say 2 or 3 minutes
2 or 3 minutes?
from the first initial knock.
Okay, and why was that?
Because when we first started knocking, the gentleman upstairs came out, and it took Detective Hankison and Lieutenant Hoover's eyes off of what we were doing, and they were focusing on getting him back in the apartment.
Okay, was it important that their eyes be focused on what you were doing?
Yes,
And was it important that he be gotten away from the scene and back into an apartment or out of the way?
we would rather him be inside and not be outside in case something happens.
Did that take a bit of time to accomplish that? Is that why you waited 2 to 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think I heard you say that your location was right under the steps, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you see the fellow upstairs that they were having the conversation with?
No, sir.
And you were the RAM man, right?
Yes, sir.
So you're not standing right in front of the door, is that correct?
No, I'm just to the side.
And are you knocking also, or is,
Yes, I am.
who all was knocking?
Sergeant Manley and myself.
And do you know where Brett Hankison was at that time?
He was, at the time that they were talking to the gentleman, I believe he was toward the bottom of the steps. I can hear him behind me, that's all out.
Okay, would that, when you say toward the bottom of the steps, would he been back there in that vestibule or breezeway area?
I would say so. Sir, I didn't take my eyes off that door once we were up there.
Okay. So you testified that you knocked and announced for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then what happened?
Once they finally had got that gentleman back inside, Sergeant Manley gave the okay to go ahead and hit.
Okay, did I hear you testify that you heard some noise in the apartment?
I did. I heard somebody say, "Who is it?" Which we knocked again and yelled police again.
And did you receive a response?
We did not.
Okay, and that's when Sergeant Mattingly gave the order to hit the door, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I believe you testified you hit the door 3 times before it opened.
First one on the middle of the door handle, the second one in between the door handle and the deadbolt, and that jarred the door almost all the way open. And then the third one, Sergeant Manley said, "Get ready, this is it." And when I hit it, it flew open, and that's when it happened.
Does it normally take you 3 hits to open the door?
It just depends on the lock and how good the wood is.
You remember Brett Hankison making some comment about your
Yes.
door opening skills? What did he say?
Yeah, it was just something to hurry up and get that door open.
Okay, so he was there watching you hit the door, I assume, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you hit the door and it flew open.
Yes, sir.
Do you know precisely where Brett Hankison was when it flew open?
They were, no, I don't know precisely. They were behind me.
Were all 7 of you guys in that vestibule, to your knowledge?
Yes, there was nobody behind. Everybody was lined up in the doorway area, going around in a kind of a horseshoe.
Okay. You hit the door, and that's when you were met with gunfire, correct?
Immediately.
When you hit that door, did you spin out of the way?
Yes, my momentum took me in to the door, but as soon as that door flung open, I just hugged the wall and I turned my back to the wall.
And why did you do that?
I don't have a gun or anything. I'm just out in the middle.
Just out there wide open, correct?
It's a dangerous position.
Okay, so you spun out of the way, and immediately there was gunfire?
Yeah, the door flies open and Sergeant Manley's saying, police search warrant, police search warrant. And as soon as I see his forearms disappear into the apartment, he's shot.
And you never got a look inside the apartment, down that hallway, correct?
I did not.
Did you observe any kind of muzzle flash?
I didn't see inside the apartment.
Okay. John Mattingly immediately went down, is that right?
He didn't immediately go down. He was yelling, "No, no, no." I remember saying that.
Is that before he was shot or after he was shot?
After, because he started saying that before he started shooting.
And then all of you, or several of you, tried to help him and get him out to the parking lot, out of that fatal funnel, correct?
Yeah.
Do you know where Brett Hankison was during that time?
I was focused on John. I don't know where he was.
Do you know how many of the 7 of you, well, Sergeant Mattingly shot, how many were helping him out of the group?
I remember seeing John sitting down on that rug. I remember seeing Miles standing over top of John. And I think I saw Tony, and I don't remember anybody else.
And you said, I think you testified, you saw Miles discharge his weapon, and John also, correct?
John first, and then when John went down, Miles stepped over top of him, kind of like a human shield, so John could get out of the way.
And they were shooting directly into the open door.
Yes.
You didn't see Brett Hankison at all?
I wasn't paying attention to anything but them shooting.
Did you hear anybody saying anything?
I heard long gun. That was it. And that's when I started to worry that somebody was gonna start shooting through the wall. That's why I ran, that's why I tried to get underneath those stairs, but then I looked back and saw John, and I crawled back over to grab him.
So you, I lost my train there. So you help John, you hear somebody yell long gun. You ultimately get John loaded on the back, on the trunk of a car and hauled down to an ambulance, correct?
After we applied two different tourniquets and packed his wound with quick clot. And
Did somebody remain behind and try to control the scene?
well, Lieutenant Hoover was with me and John, and he was the one that he's the one that removed his belt to put his own personal belt over his leg, because we didn't have a tourniquet at the time until Detective James came with his. Then a 3rd Division officer had shown up, and we advised him to ram the gate because he had other medical supplies. And when he came in, Lieutenant Hoover applied some quick clot, and that's when we picked John up. It took a long time for the ambulance to get to us.
Can you estimate how long from the time you hit that door and opened it until the shooting was over? Can you estimate how long that took?
It seemed like an eternity, sir. I don't know. You talking about from when I hit the door to the very last shot?
Yes.
I don't know. Forever. I still hear it, so I don't know.
And but I think I heard you testify that you felt like there was still a shooter in the apartment, correct?
Yeah, I can hear. I'm looking at John and I'm looking at Miles shooting, but I also hear gunfire. So,
Okay. And after you got John out of the fatal funnel, out of the line of fire, would it be important for somebody to stick around and keep an eye on the apartment itself?
Miles was still in the doorway when we were helping John out.
Okay. But now after John is out and you've got him out,
We yelled at Detective Cosgrove, "Come on!" And he ran over and helped secure while we were working on John.
and do you know whether Detective Hankison also helped secure or watch the apartment?
I'm pretty sure that everybody was surrounding where we were around that white vehicle, because that was our bunker. What it was, I couldn't tell you where everybody was.
And you don't know where Brett was specifically, correct?
I don't.
And you never saw him discharge his weapon?
I did not.
Do you know, okay, and do you know who called for the first cruiser on the scene to ram the gate? I assume it was one of your,
I mean, I did. I was on the radio. I had 2 different radios. I had a SWAT radio and the regular channel radio, but
would you describe the scene as pretty chaotic?
once the shooting was done, I mean, it was just we were trying to give medical aid to the sergeant, not knowing if we still had an active shooter on our hands, trying to get him to safety, at least to an ambulance. So, yeah, it was pretty chaotic.
Was there a lot of radio traffic at that point, do you know?
Yes,
Including you on it?
yes.
Now, you testified that after John was loaded into the ambulance, he asked you to follow him to the hospital, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you did that?
Yes, sir.
Why?
I was gonna ride with him, but Tony had hopped in, and John's just one of my best friends.
Okay. Once you got to the hospital, was there a crowd there?
No. We met the ambulance. I got there. There was a lot of police cars. I mean, it was a pretty long train of police following us.
Did you ever see Brett Hankison at the hospital?
For a short time, I think, back in the ER.
Is there anything in your policy and procedure that says you can't go to the hospital or shouldn't go to the hospital, to your knowledge?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
And at some point while you were at the hospital, PIU, what's PIU stand for?
It's the Public Integrity Unit.
And they investigate all officer-involved shootings, is that correct?
Yes.
And a sergeant from PIU advised you to come to the PIU headquarters to begin their investigation, correct?
Yes, well, I also had, I had Sergeant Madeline's, they had taken John's property off of him inside the ambulance, his vest, his wallet. I don't know of everything, but Tony had it. And Tony, he said my truck was parked right next to the ambulance that he had come in, so we put it in the backseat of my truck. And when PIU, I can't remember the sergeants, I think it was, might have been Roof. I think it was Sergeant Roof and Sergeant Brooks, but they wanted to take pictures of his property and collect that first, and then after they did that, they told me to go on down to PIU.
Okay, so where did the pictures of Sergeant Mattingly's property take place?
So they took pictures of it in the backseat of my truck.
Okay, there was a bullet in his wallet, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, when you got to PIU, what happened there?
It's kind of a waiting game. We waited for everybody that was there on scene to show up. And our attorney we had to wait on our attorney to get there so we can talk to him.
And do they take photographs of you and your equipment at PIU?
After the, once you talk to the attorney and all that, yeah, then they take separate photos of everybody.
Okay, did you see Brett Hankison at PIU?
Yes.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Just one, Your Honor. A couple questions ago, Mr. Matthews asked you about, I believe it was Detective Mattingly looking back or something going on in the breezeway with Detective Hankison. Then Detective Hankison made a comment to you about ramming the door or something like that. Do you ever remember Detective Mattingly telling Hankison to do anything differently, to get focused or anything like that?
No, my concentration was getting that door open, and it's kind of a goal is that the guy that's got the ram also holds the safety of the other guys, because if I got to beat on that door for a long time, it puts those guys in harm's way.
Okay,
The faster you get in, the safer you're going to be.
okay. When the door flies open like you described, and then the minutes afterwards, did you ever see a long gun ever at the scene?
I didn't see inside the apartment.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Anything else of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
You can step down, thank you. Commonwealth's next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, it's going to be Detective Tony James.
you go ahead and take a seat, please? If you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor, I do.
Thank you. If you're comfortable taking your mask off while you testify, you may, but you can leave it on if you choose.
Okay.
Please tell the jury your name.
Anthony James.
Okay? I'm going to have you speak pretty loudly into the microphone so we can
Okay.
pick up your voice. So I apologize. I'm giving you the direction. So, all right. And where do you work?
Now I work for Jefferson County Sheriff's Department,
Okay. Where did you used to work?
for Louisville Metro Police Department.
And how long were you there?
A little over 20-some years.
27? Wow. Now, in working there, what units were you assigned to?
I worked in patrol, then I went from patrol to flex unit, which is like a narcotic unit within the division. Then I went from that to, at that time, what's called Metro Narcotics. I was there for, I don't know, several years there. I got a canine dog there, and then I was transferred out of there into what was called the Viper unit for a while. Ran a dog there, ran a dog at the Mobile 9th when they started that unit, and then I transferred out of that and went back to which is CID, which is basically narcotics again.
Okay. When did you transfer back to CID?
I guess I want to say like 3 years ago before I retired.
Okay. Would that have been in 2019?
I believe it could have been 2018, but I believe it was 2018 or 2019, somewhere in there.
And I'm going to direct you to a certain date. Were you still with CID on March 12th and then into the hours of 13th of 2020?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What at that time, what were you doing within CID?
I was actually working with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, kind of assigned to them, and I worked on the highway criminal interdiction unit up there on the highway, doing that and doing, traffic enforcement, things like that.
So you say highway, is that like Interstate 65, 64?
Yes.
Okay. So on March 12th and March 13th, you were still in that unit, obviously. What were you going to do that evening?
They had organized a series of search warrants, and I was going to be assisting with executing those search warrants.
How were you notified, or how did you even find out that they were doing this series?
They had put out an email originally, I believe, asking for help, and so I had replied they needed help, and I think somebody might have come through the office too and asked, and so I was like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll help.
Okay. So this was voluntary?
Yes.
Okay. Now, going back to that evening, what time do you think you went out to do your assignment? What time did your evening begin?
I think I got to the office maybe around 10 o'clock maybe that night, or maybe 9:30, 10-ish, somewhere in there.
What office was that?
That was the main, CID office over on Ormsby, at the main office there.
Do you remember who was there at the CID office when you arrived?
There was a lot of people, like a lot of CID staff was there. There were some command people there from downtown. Just a lot of the detectives that were going to help with that part of the warrants.
When you're there at CID, do you ever receive any guidance, briefings, anything like that?
Yes.
Do you remember who gave you that?
I believe West Barton.
Okay. Do you remember anything about that briefing?
They were just going over the different locations, and they had them on a board with packets that were put together like per location.
Do you remember anything specifically about what location you were assigned to?
Yes, I was assigned to Springfield Drive.
Okay. Is that 3003 Springfield Drive,
Yes, sir.
Apartment 4?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. On that briefing, do you remember what type of search you were going to be doing?
It was going to be for a narcotic search. It was a search warrant
Okay.
for that location.
Okay. Do you remember anything specific about it?
Just that, they believe that either money or dope could be stored there is what intelligence that I got from the briefing that night.
Okay. Do you remember what type of warrant it would be?
Originally, it said on the thing, no knock, and then they had changed it on the board and it said knock and announce.
Okay. Do you remember why?
I have no idea. It was done when I got there. It was on the board up there.
Did you receive any background information on the location?
Just some basic information of who might have lived there, and what that location might have been used for.
Okay. Do you know why it was changed to a knock?
I didn't change it. I don't know who did. From what I understand, they thought that it wasn't gonna be, necessary to do the no knock there. I don't know why they kind of decided that.
Okay. How long were you at CID?
I want to say like an hour maybe, or hour and a half or so.
Okay. Where'd you go next?
We went from there to the next staging area,
What was that?
off of Manslick Drive, like I believe, close to the target location. I believe it was like a church or a business or something there.
Okay. Do you remember who all was staged with you?
Yeah, I believe it was everybody that was going to be serving that warrant, other than Mike Campbell. I believe Mike Campbell was at the location with the eyes on the location.
Okay. Who was going to serve it with you that evening? Who was your team?
It was Sergeant Mattingly, Lieutenant Hoover, Mike Nobles, Brett Hankison, Cosgrove, and myself,
Okay.
I believe.
How long were you there at that location?
Maybe 30 minutes, something like that, or 40 or something in that area, maybe.
Okay. Do you remember how many people were also there besides your team?
There was an ambulance on standby there that one of the bosses, I guess, had called to have on standby for us.
Is that pretty standard?
Yes.
What do you all do next?
They were waiting for the other warrants to be served, and at the same time, that's when they were gonna go and hit this location at the same time, like simultaneously as close as possible.
Okay. Do you remember who the target of those warrants would be?
Of what, all the warrants?
Yes.
I believe Mr. Glover was the main target.
Okay. Jamarcus Glover?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you all go to 3003 Springfield Drive, what was that? What was the scene? Set the scene for us. What was that like?
Sergeant Mattingly drove in, and then there were people behind him following in his car. He pulled up to the location a little bit from the location, the apartments, and then we just kind of all parked and got everything together and then started the approach.
Was the scene as reported, or was there any difference there when you arrived versus what you had been briefed on?
Not that, as in what? I don't,
Were there any, was there any individuals, cars, anything outside that you had not been briefed on?
there was a car pulled out front,
Okay.
but I don't know if it was in play or not. It was like a SUV, a big SUV, like a Sequoia van, a Toyota Sequoia, I think, was parked out front.
Was it occupied?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't believe it was, but I'm not for sure.
Okay. Did you have a role or an assignment within the team?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
I have a shield that I had in my vehicle,
Okay.
and I had the shield with me.
Okay. Just so that the jury understands, what do you mean by shield?
A shield is a ballistic shield. It's about 2 foot wide, maybe a little wider, and probably some of them can be 3 feet long, 4 feet long. And they're just a tool that you can use to help protect yourself, to give you a little bit more protection from rifle rounds or any kind of rounds, besides just your ballistic vest.
Okay. You all get out of your vehicle, what do you do next?
We all approach the location, to the hallway where apartment is located.
Do you remember if it was light or dark at that time?
It was at night.
Okay.
Yeah, it was dark.
Okay.
But there were lights like in the hall and stuff.
Okay.
And the parking lot had some street lights.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what has already been admitted as pieces of evidence as 19 and 5. Have you take a look at those for me for a second?
Okay.
And what are those photos?
Those are photos of the apartment
Okay.
and the door of the apartment.
Are those a fair and accurate depiction of that apartment on March 13th of 2020?
As best as I can recall, yeah.
Okay. Now, I also have that on the screen, the piece of evidence that's been admitted already. I'm going to have you have the laser pointer, which is right next to you. When you approach, where are you?
When I'll walk in from out in the parking lot, and we come in, and I'm kind of staged back over in this area, right in there, I would say. Sergeant Mattingly is like here by the door, and then I believe Mike Nobles is like under the steps right there.
Okay.
And then I think Lieutenant Hoover is there, and then I don't know if it was Miles, and then maybe Detective Hankinson there, and then I think Mike was behind him.
Okay. When you approach this location, could you see into any apartments?
No.
Okay. You could not see into that window right there?
I mean, I really didn't look
Okay.
at it. I just kind of made a mental note that it's a window,
Okay.
and that is, can be a threat to us. So I just made a mental note that there's a window there,
Okay.
or a sliding glass door.
Okay. Was there anyone on that patio?
No, no.
Okay.
Not that I saw.
Okay. So you said you were underneath the staircase.
Well, no, Detective Nobles was under the staircase. I was like back in that area over there.
Okay. Do you ever hear anyone else
As far as what, sir?
that comes out into the scene besides your team?
Yeah, while Sergeant Mattingly began knocking on the door, pretty much almost instantly, I hear a voice from upstairs, and they're like, leave him alone. What are you doing down there? I guess they heard from the knocking.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you about that in a second. Could you ever see that person that comes out?
I did not. I
Okay.
was, like I said, I kind of stayed right there, and the steps come out, that landing, so I could hear them, but I never did see anybody.
Now, you said that there was a knock. How many times did you knock?
Well, I didn't knock, but Sergeant Mattingly knocked for a long, long time.
Okay. And then is that when the neighbor pops out?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, it was pretty close to, he had knocked a little bit, and then that's when he said something down to us, and then John kept, went on back to knocking and announcing.
Okay. Do you remember if anyone spoke to the neighbor?
Yes,
Who was that?
I believe Detective Hankinson did.
Okay. Was there anything memorable about that? Did that cause you?
No, it was just like, get back inside, police, get back inside. I can't remember exactly what verbatim, but
Okay.
to the effect of, get back inside.
Okay. Did you take your eyes off the door? Was it a distraction?
For a little bit, maybe, yeah.
You said Mattingly goes back to knocking.
Uh-huh.
What happens next?
He continues to knock, police, search warrant police come to the door, and nobody comes, and then it's decided that they're gonna utilize the RAM.
Who is going to do the ram?
Detective Nobles.
Okay. At this point, who is armed in that doorway?
Everyone.
Who has a pistol drawn at this time?
I'd say everybody probably except for Detective Nobles.
Okay. Because he has a ram?
Yes.
Okay. You said that I'm going to show you what we've already admitted as the other picture right here.
Yes.
Where were you standing as there is?
Probably right in this area, kind of like right in that area, maybe somewhere in there.
Okay. Where are the others?
Sergeant Mattingly is like right here, and then Mike Nobles is over here, and then there's just a stack of people.
Okay.
But like I said, I believe it was Lieutenant Hoover and I guess Miles was in line. And then I remember Detective Hankinson was kind of like to the side where he had addressed the guy upstairs.
Not in the doorway?
No.
Okay. Nobles hits the door. Do you know how many times?
I believe 3, sir.
Okay? Once that third time occurs, what happens?
The door comes open and instantly a shot comes out and hits Sergeant Mattingly.
Which way does the door swing,
It swings inward.
as it's depicted here?
Yes.
Okay. The door opens. What are you doing?
Well, as soon as he gets hit and goes down, he doesn't go down at first. He's returning fire. And then he tries to walk backwards, I guess, to get out of that danger zone. And that's when he starts falling.
And you're describing Mattingly?
Yes.
Okay. What else are the others doing?
I really can tell you, I was basically putting the shield in front of me. And as John was going down, I was just hyper-focused on John, trying to get him out of that area, in that fatal area right there,
Okay.
to get him out, to get him to me or get a bunker or get the shield in front of him.
Do you remember anyone else in the doorway at that time?
Not at that split second, no.
Okay. Do you remember where Detective Cosgrove was?
I don't. I believe that he was in this stick in the line here, somewhere in that line.
Okay. What do you do next?
I just try to get to Detective Mattingly, Sergeant Mattingly. I'm trying to grab him and drag him back to me, and Lieutenant Hoover is also on the other side. And John's just trying to scoot over, and he actually starts scooting over with his one hand going towards Lieutenant Hoover.
Now, if I switch photos, where is this occurring?
Like right in that zone right there, I guess, kind of. Probably, I would say, a foot or so from the entrance, but Sergeant Mattingly is still in that zone right there.
Okay. When you're in this zone, can you ever see in the door?
No.
Was it dark or light in the door?
It looked pretty dark to me, what little bit I could see, from the side. It looked dark.
Okay. Were you ever able to see anything inside the apartment at all?
Not really, no.
You said that, I believe, Detective Hoover was also aiding Detective Mattingly.
Yes.
What do you do next in this?
Well, I'm trying to get him to me, while we're trying to grab him, and he's trying to grab him. Sergeant Mattingly starts moving. While this is going on, I'm hearing the gunfire go off, kind of simultaneously. And that's when, at that time, I believed it was Detective Hankison at that doorway, firing into the apartment, covering Sergeant Mattingly.
Okay. Did you ever see him at the doorway actually doing that?
No,
Did you ever see anyone else at the doorway?
no. All I saw was legs from where I was at, because I was just focused on John, trying to get him to me, that all I could see was like a pair of legs out of the corner of my peripheral. And I knew that it was one of us. And the last frame that I had was of this stick and of Detective Hankison kind of like just outside that stick a little bit. And that's why, for whatever reason, I assumed that was him that had ran up to that door at that time and was returning fire.
Okay. But you don't know?
No.
When you all come down the breezeway, as you described, with Mattingly, what do you do?
Well, they're bringing him out and dragging him in that area there, and I just kind of hold my position there briefly, because I didn't know if somebody was going to come out and try to ambush them while they're trying to, get to cover. So I kind of hold what I've got just briefly, and then once I saw that they got him, kind of out into this area, then that's when I ran out to aid him, and I knew I had tourniquets on me and all that.
Okay. At some point, do you realize where everyone is at that point?
Yeah, once I get out, I come out, and because I know that this glass and all that's here, that's a threat to me, so I don't want to run that away. So I came out and ran out to the right into the parking lot and made a real wide turn, and then came back up behind where they had Sergeant Mattingly behind the white Sequoia that was parked out there.
Was anyone located in the breezeway at that point?
No,
Where were they located?
I'm not sure. I know that I was there working on John, getting the tourniquet on him, And I know, I believe Mike was there, and I believe Lieutenant Hoover was right there with me, helping me.
Did you ever see Detective Hankison rendering aid?
No, I don't know where, I know he was probably out there with us somewhere, but I don't know, I don't recall that.
You don't know his location?
Not really, no.
Okay. Once you all have rendered aid, what do you do?
Well, they're trying to get the ambulance to him, and that's when, I believe that's when the ambulance was taking forever to get there, and that's when the marked car came through and drove through the gate. And once it drove through the gate, then I was actually trying to get the gate moved so we could get the ambulance maybe back there, but it was chained and you couldn't get it moved. So I was trying to get across to the ambulance, and one of the ambulance workers gets out, and I informed him, hey, we've got an officer down there. I've got a tourniquet on him. I don't know where else he's shot, but I know he's shot in the leg. And that there's shooting going on down there. So, you know, take cover or whatever you need to do to get to John if you're going to go down there. I go try to run towards the ambulance to get like a backboard or something else to put John on. And by the time I was going to it, it was taken off, because the way the complex is, to get to where we're at, you have to go all the way back out on the main road and come back around because of this fence. Excuse me. So at that time, when I was kind of waving, when I was trying to wave the ambulance down, that's when I kind of turned around and I saw they had put John on a car and had drove him to us. And the ambulance actually turned around and came back, and then we just walked over the fence and loaded him on the ambulance.
Okay. Now, where did you go next?
I got in the ambulance. I had his feet, and I got in the ambulance with him. And
You were in the ambulance itself?
yes, sir.
Okay. And you all go to where?
University Hospital.
Okay. How long were you at the hospital?
I want to say maybe 45 minutes to an hour or so, maybe. I don't know exactly the time.
Then where do you go?
I went to PIU.
Okay. Do you remember seeing anyone at the hospital?
There was a lot of people from CID. There was another major case group, and they showed up down there. And there was just other law enforcement people down there.
Now, why did you go to PIU?
Because we had been at the shooting.
And is that policy?
Yes.
Okay. And that's policy no matter what, whether or not you shoot or not?
That you go there, yeah.
Okay. Now, when you go to PIU, what do you do?
They'll take photos and everything, and then you can give them a statement or, you know, whatever you need to do.
Now, obviously, later on, you find out more details about this case.
Yes.
But on that evening, you don't know for sure who was or was not shooting after Mattingly fell?
No. I believe that at that time, I thought it was Detective Hankison at that door.
And then, at that time,
Mhm.
is that different than today?
Yes.
Okay. Who do you know today to be the shooter?
The person that was over John at that time was Detective Cosgrove.
At any point when you're out there on the scene that evening, did you yourself ever see a long gun?
No.
Did you ever see any gun?
No.
And did you discharge your weapon?
No, sir.
And why is that?
I didn't have a target, a clear identifiable target.
And without an identifiable target, you chose not to shoot?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Detective James. That's it, Your Honor. I appreciate your time and going through that with us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we take a 15-minute break? It's 3 o'clock, and we will resume testimony at 3:15. Please remember the separation admonition. All right, ladies and gentlemen, anything to report from the break? All right, then we will resume with testimony, and Mr. Matthews?
Thank you, Judge. Detective James, you indicated that you volunteered to be a part of this search warrant team on March the 12th going into the 13th, 2020, correct?
Yes, sir.
How many times have you participated during the course of your career in the execution of search warrants, approximately?
Probably 100 or more, probably hundreds.
Have you ever had one that turned out like this did?
No, sir.
Did you have anything to do with the preparation of the search warrant affidavits or the investigation that led to their issuance?
No, sir.
You just got a phone call or text message asking you to volunteer, correct?
No, sir. It was a email. They sent out an email, I believe. I know at least one email, and then I think I was in the office one afternoon and somebody was going around saying that they needed help.
Do you remember when that was in relation to March 12th or 13th?
I don't, honestly. I want to say maybe that week or week before, maybe.
Okay, so this wasn't on that day they called you and said, hey, come on out and help us?
No.
Okay. Now, you said you responded or reported to the CID office, that's on Ormsby, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you got there, there were quite a few CID personnel people there?
Yes, sir.
Do you know everybody in CID?
Mostly, yes, sir.
Do you work with a particular unit?
I do.
Which one is that?
I work under the airport interdiction unit. They deal with the parcel packages. And then I actually was assigned to the highway. It's actually it's like a dual interdiction. They do the airport stuff, and then I did the highway stuff.
Okay. And do you usually or frequently work with other unit members from different CID units?
Not as often. My job was kind of unique. I went in and worked with the sheriffs more than I did our own unit some of the time, not all the time, but I did help out somewhat.
Okay. Now, you indicated that when you got to the CID office, that was where the briefing took place before you went out to Springfield, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned something about packets are put together for each location.
I believe there was packets out, yeah.
What's a packet? What would be in a packet?
It would be like the location, maybe like a map overview, pictures, any kind of intel they would have, things like that.
Do you recall seeing any map overview or pictures of 3003 Springfield?
I don't remember going through the packet. I saw, I believe, a packet for it, but I didn't go through it per se, like page by page or anything like that.
Did anybody ever tell you the physical layout of the building at 3003?
I believe that, yeah, they said it was an apartment complex, I believe.
Did they ever go into any more detail? Did they tell you apartment 4 there's another apartment right behind it?
I don't recall that, no.
Okay, so when you got there at the CID office, there's a whiteboard up there with everybody's assignment on it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you have anything to do with choosing your assignment?
No, sir.
Did you know all the guys that you were going out with?
On with my group, yes.
Yes. And you testified that your understanding was that the search warrant was for money or dope being stored there, correct?
Or, yes, or both.
Do you know, and I'm going to jump ahead here, but do you know whether the search at 3003 Springfield Apartment 4 was ever completed by CID?
No, sir, I don't believe it was.
Do you know how it got changed from a no-knock to a knock-and-announce warrant?
No, sir, I don't.
You didn't have anything to do with that, correct?
No, sir.
Okay. You testified that Mike Campbell was at the location already,
I believe he was, yes.
and he was the eyes-on or the VO,
Yes, sir.
and what was his function was to what? Report anything that he saw unusual?
Yeah, I believe so.
And to your knowledge, nothing unusual was reported?
Nothing was told to me.
So you all went out to the staging area at a church. Where was that church?
On Manslick Road, I believe.
Is that
Just
near-
real close to the location, about I want to say maybe a quarter mile away or a mile, maybe, no, I don't know, not very far.
You testified that there was an ambulance on standby at that location, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I believe I heard you say that that is usual when there's a search warrant being served.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever had occasion to need an ambulance?
Yes, sir.
And why is that?
Because people were shot, officers were shot.
Is that something that happens on a regular basis?
It happened one other time besides this with me, where I wasn't involved in it, but the SWAT team was executing a warrant, and one of the members were shot executing that warrant.
And that's why you keep an ambulance close by, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And for the people that we're serving the warrant for, too.
In case somebody there is injured during the course of that?
Yes, sir.
Now, you testified that Jamarcus Glover was the primary target to your knowledge, correct?
Yes, sir.
How did you learn that?
Because of the briefing, and then on the board, they had some names up, I believe, up on the board, on the side of the board there.
And while you all were staged at the church, you were waiting to hear word that that the search warrants on Elliott were in progress, correct?
Correct.
And then you got the word, and that's when you all started up toward Springfield.
Yes, sir.
I believe you testified that there was a Toyota Sequoia parked right in front of where you wanted to basically stage, or,
Pretty much, yeah, it was parked there.
but was it occupied to your knowledge?
I don't know. I can't testify to that. I don't believe it was, but I can't say 100%.
You indicated, did you have a specific role in this?
I had that shield that I had the shield.
Okay, and the shield is, you called it a ballistic shield, right?
Yes, sir.
I assume that's to stop bullets if they get fired at you.
Yes, sir.
How is it that you were not at the head of the stack to go into the apartment?
Well, I was. That's why I was on the corner, I wasn't in front of the rest of them. Sergeant Manley was knocking, and then when the door came open, he just, took a step in, and I couldn't get in front of him, and he already he was already shot.
And you immediately attended to him?
I tried to get him to cover. I was trying to get him to me.
Did you see him returning fire?
I did.
And you saw Miles Cosgrove returning fire?
Well, I didn't know at the time it was Miles, and I didn't really see it. I could hear it, and I could see somebody's feet right there, and then John or Sergeant Mattingly being right here. But I could see somebody right here by the doorway where, and I could hear the gunfire.
You later learned that was Miles Cosgrove, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
How would you describe that gunfire?
It was very intense and very loud.
By very intense, what do you mean?
Very rapid and extremely loud. We were in that alcove, and it magnified the sound of the weapons.
Do you have any idea how many rounds were discharged?
I mean, I know now, but at that time, I was trying to, not really. I was like, man, is that 8, 10? I mean, it was just a lot of successions of gunfire.
How long did that gunfire last, if you know, or if you can estimate?
I mean, it was seconds. It wasn't like forever. It was, it was like, I want to say, I don't know. I can't put a time limit on it. I would hate to say a minute, and it's not a minute, but it was extended period of time, but it wasn't just super quick. It maybe 45 seconds to a minute or something, maybe something like that. It was very fast.
But you don't know for sure.
I can't put a time limit on it exactly to testify on the time.
Do you know what Brett Hankison's assignment was that night?
No, sir.
I mean, do you know that he had a canine with him?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever see the canine? Do you know his dog's name?
Yes, I do.
If I told you Franklin, would that ring a bell?
Absolutely, yes, sir. It is,
Okay.
Franklin.
Did you ever see Franklin out that night?
Not when we were there, not while we were executing the warrant, no.
What would the dog's role have been?
Once the location was secure, Detective Hankinson would have ran the dog in there to search for contraband.
Was Detective Hankison also expected to participate in making entry and securing the location?
Yes, I believe so. He was with the rest of us there.
Okay. But you don't know specifically what he did or did not do that night, correct?
As far as his job duty there, I mean, he was just, in the stick with everybody else. Other than once we secured the location, then he would run the canine.
Did you ever see him discharge his weapon?
No, sir.
Did you see him engage with the fellow upstairs?
As far as talking to him,
Yes.
yes.
And what was that all about, do you know?
The guy, I believe, upstairs heard us knocking on the door, announcing police, and he was responding back down, talking to him, and that's when Detective Hankinson was like, "Get back in the house, police, get back in."
And did that individual ultimately go back in the house?
I believe he did. I didn't hear any more from him.
What was going on while that was happening?
Sergeant Manningly was still at the doorway, and then he re-engaged and started knocking again.
And when you say started knocking, is he just pounding on the door?
Yeah, he was pounding on the door, police, police come to the door, search warrant police.
He was verbalizing police?
Yes.
You heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think you testified that as soon as Mike Nobles hit that door and it came open, do you know how many times he had to hit it?
I believe he hit it 3 times.
Okay. And as soon as it came open, is that when you were met with gunfire?
Yes, sir.
Where were you at that point?
I was
Were you, s-
to the left. Do you want me to show you on the thing, or?
well, we don't have it up there, but were
Okay.
you were still to the left of the
I
door
was still to the left of the door.
with your shield?
Yes,
And did you have your weapon drawn at that
I
point?
did.
Did you slide around when the shot was fired and look into the apartment at all?
No. I basically backed up because I saw John in the doorway. As he's returning fire, he takes like a step back and goes down. And my primary objective was to grab him and pull him out of what we call a fatal funnel right there.
And you don't know what Brett Hankison was doing, correct?
No.
Do you know how many there were a total of 7 of you fellas out there doing the search warrant, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know how many were tending to John Mattingly?
I know that I was there because I was putting the tourniquet on him.
And that was a tourniquet that you had?
Yes, sir.
Was John saying anything at that point?
I think he was, he was kind of in shock a little bit, and saying I'm hit, and that was about it. He was still kind of trying to get moving. Are you meaning when we got him outside? Was
Yes.
he saying anything? Yeah, he was talking about how much it was burning and hurting. And then I had to.
Counselor,
Sorry
would you
to
pause
ask
for a
you
minute,
this.
please? Well, my little button's not working. We seem to be spending a lot of time talking about Mattingly. This trial's not about Mattingly, nor is it about his injuries, nor is it about what he said, because he's not going to testify. So, we've gone through this now with a couple of witnesses. We know how he was shot. We know about him being, the tourniquet put on him and being transported and taken in an ambulance. I think we need to get back to talking about Mr. Hankison and apartment 3. Okay?
Detective, I'm sorry to keep prying like that.
It's okay.
You indicated that there was a call for an ambulance, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember did you recognize how did that call take place? Who did it?
I don't know who did.
Did
I
you-
know somebody got him there.
You didn't hear Brett Hankison call, is that correct?
He could have. I really don't, I don't know who did.
Okay, did you hear Brett Hankison go on the radio and tell the first responding officer to ram the gate?
I heard somebody saying ram the gate, ram the gate. I didn't know who that might have been, but I do know that somebody was telling them to ram it.
And your testimony is that you don't know particularly what Brett Hankison did that evening, correct?
I know he was with us, and I know that, like I said, that originally I thought he was at that doorway, and I found out later that he wasn't, that I guess he was in the parking lot in that area over in there.
Well, but he was with you as you made the initial
Yes,
entry
sir.
into the
Oh,
apartment.
absolutely, yes, sir.
And you don't have any idea what he saw?
No, sir.
You've never discussed this with him, correct?
No, sir.
You have nothing further.
Anything on redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, and the Commonwealth's next witness?
Mike Nobles, I'm sorry, Mike Campbell, Detective Mike Campbell.
If you go ahead and take a seat, please. And if you'd raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. If you are comfortable taking your mask off with you while you testify, you may, but you're not required to.
State your name for the record, please.
Michael Campbell.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm employed by Louisville Metro Police Department. I'm a
What did-
sergeant in the 2nd Division currently.
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
I'm a sergeant in the 2nd Division.
A sergeant in the 2nd Division. Where's the 2nd Division located?
It's the west end of the city
And how long have you been in that position?
since March of last year. March of last year.
How long have you been with the department?
Since 1996.
25 years?
25 and a little
25
bit.
years. And so you've held various positions during all those years.
Yes,
And during all those years, have you had occasion to serve search warrants?
yes.
Many search warrants?
A few,
Few,
yeah. Not as many as some people, but a few more than most.
yes. In March of 2020, what was your position?
March of 2020, I was a detective on the PBI squad in the interdiction division.
Place-based
Place-based-
initiative?
Yeah, place-based investigation.
And who was your sergeant?
My sergeant was Kyle Meany.
Sergeant Kyle Meany?
Kyle Meany, yes.
Okay. So you were aware of the investigation that your unit was conducting regarding a group of individuals, including Jamarcus Glover.
Yes.
Did you have any participation in the actual obtaining of the search warrant for that group of houses and apartments?
I helped conduct surveillance when we were.
Did surveillance?
Yes.
Where did you do surveillance?
Well, we did surveillance all over. We did it in the 2400 block of Elliott, and we also did it on Springfield and some other places also.
And did you personally do some surveillance on Springfield?
Yes,
Were you aware of that Ms. Taylor lived at the apartment on Springfield?
yes,
And did you know what kind of vehicle she drove?
yes.
And what kind of vehicle was that?
It was a black Charger that was I believe it was a black Charger that was registered to her.
Okay, and had you observed that vehicle there at the apartment?
Yes.
And what kind of do you know what kind of vehicle Jamarcus Glover drove?
At the time, it was I believe it was like a red Charger.
Okay. Now, were you assigned to participate in the search that was taking place that night of March 12th?
Yes.
And which address were you assigned to?
The Springfield address.
And did you attend the briefing?
No, I was the I, so I went out there prior to the briefing to see if anybody was coming or going from the address,
So you were the I, meaning you were
ahead of everybody else.
to go early to do surveillance on the apartment
Yes.
or the complex. And so what time did you go out there
I don't,
to Springfield Drive?
I'm not really 100% sure. I believe it was about 9 p.m.
But you had been out there previously, you said,
Yes.
doing surveillance, so you were familiar with the building and the surrounding area.
Yes.
Did you see anyone leave the apartment, that breezeway into apartment 4 during the time you were out there?
No.
Or any cars, anybody leave?
No.
Did you see anybody come back
No.
and enter the apartment?
No.
And at that hour, it was dark.
It was getting dark. Yeah.
Getting dark.
It was dark.
Did you see the car that you believed belonged to Breonna Taylor?
Yes. I believe it was out there.
And where was it?
It was parked on the same side as the apartment, but it was a couple of spaces down from the breezeway.
Okay. And so you didn't see anybody get in the car, or the car didn't move?
No.
Right. At what point then did you, where were you parked to do the surveillance?
I moved several times. At one point, I was parked on Springfield at the end, at dead ends by a dumpster. I parked there for a while. Other times, I parked up. It's like terraced, so I parked up and looked down. I was out there for several hours, so I moved several times.
And did you have communication with the other members of the team that were going to execute the search warrant?
Yes, by phone.
And how did you meet up with them?
When they arrived to do the search warrant, at that point, I was parked down by the dumpster, which is where Springfield dead ends, or takes a turn. And as they came by, I just met up with them as they came by.
So you met up with them as they were walking up to,
As they were driving up, and then we parked.
oh, you drove your vehicle and met
Right.
them? And then what did you do?
We got out of the vehicles and we approached the apartment.
As you walked up to the apartment, what was the order of people walking up? Where were you in that?
I was toward the back. The first couple of people were like Anthony James, then Sergeant Mattingly. Somewhere in there was Mike Nobles. He was in front of me. Lieutenant Hoover was there also. And trying to think who else.
To show you what's been entered as Exhibit 19. that photograph is now on the screen behind you. And if you would take the laser pointer and point out how you approached the stairway and the entryway there.
So we came down this way, and then we curled into here, and Detective James was standing right around here, Sergeant Mattingly was right there, I think Lieutenant Hoover was back over here, Nobles, and then I believe it was Hankinson and myself were back over in here, more toward this end of the, more toward here.
Yes, at the end of the steps,
Yeah,
you and Hankison.
right, he was somewhere in here. He was either, I don't remember exactly where he was standing when we were out there.
Right.
But I was toward the back,
Were you were the very last one
I believe so.
at the end?
I believe so.
And so what happened then after everybody was in position?
So we began knocking on the door.
And who was knocking?
I believe it was Sergeant Mattingly that started off knocking.
And was, continue on, then what happened?
So we knocked for a really long time, and we had began announcing that we were the police, so it was really loud at that
Yeah.
point.
Yes?
And that's when a person from up here came out, and we talked to him.
And he came out at the top of the steps
Yes,
on the landing?
yes,
And where you were able to see him?
yes.
And who began engaging with him?
We all were engaging him, but Detective Hankinson got him to go back in.
What did he say to him?
They were just really, he was really assertive about going back in. They were loud. I was trying to keep an eye on this door, this sliding door and that door, but everybody was yelling at him. And then they had a loud confrontation, and he went back in.
You said Hankison was more assertive with him?
Yeah.
You
And he was
remember-
the one who finally got him to go back in.
He's the one that finally got him to go back in.
Right.
Then what happened?
We stood there for a second longer, knocked a little bit longer, and then they said, oh, well, I guess they're not coming to the door. And then Detective Nobles hit it with the ram. And I think it's laying down here somewhere. Hit it with the ram and hit it 2 or 3 times. It popped open. And when the door popped open, Sergeant Manley started to step. He started to move toward the door, and that's when the shooting started. He was shot at the doorway.
Who got shot?
Sergeant Mattingly.
And did you see anyone return fire?
He was returning fire, and forgot Detective Cosgrove stepped up and returned fire. And Mattingly went against this wall into this corner where Detective James was. And then shooting was going back and forth for a second. And then everybody rolled out into the parking lot.
And where were you exactly when the shooting started?
When the shooting started, I was right about here. And then when they rolled back out into the parking lot, I backpedaled back.
Right, and did you return fire?
I did not.
Because you were out by the end of the steps.
I was out here by the end of the steps.
Where was Hankison?
I don't remember where he was at that point.
Did you see him shoot?
I didn't see him shoot.
So where did you go exactly?
So after everybody pulled back, we started to treat Sergeant Mattingly for his gunshot wound.
So you were helping do that?
I was helping do that, and then I noticed there was a bunch of people helping him. So then I went back to cover down on this door and this door.
Now, could you see through that sliding door?
No, you could not.
And when you went back to start covering, did you notice it had been shot through?
I noticed there was some gunshot. I noticed there were holes in it that appeared to be gunshots.
Okay. And you couldn't see through it?
I couldn't see through it.
ultimately, you left the scene
Yes,
and you went to Public Integrity Unit
correct,
and you were interviewed.
correct,
And that's protocol.
right.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Campbell, do you know precisely how long you were out there with your eyes on 3003 Springfield?
From about 9 until around 11 or so when we executed the warrant.
Okay, and you didn't see anybody come or go during that time, is that
Didn't
correct?
see anyone come or go.
Do you recall seeing a white Toyota Sequoia parked?
That was the person who went up to the top. He pulled up and he went up there. I didn't see, I believe it was the one that was double parked. It was a white vehicle double parked out here, and that was the person who went upstairs. I didn't see anybody come or go from our target.
Okay, when did the Sequoia arrive?
Maybe 10 or 15 minutes prior to us executing the warrant.
Okay.
But they went upstairs and that wasn't,
Was that the same individual that came out
I believe so.
and everybody engaged with and tried to get him to go back in?
Correct.
And you said Sergeant Hankison was very assertive in getting him to do that, correct? And he ultimately did go back in?
We ultimately went back in.
And then you described how there was knocking and announcing on the door.
Correct.
Do you know how long that knocking and announcing occurred?
No, it went for a long time. It went longer than we normally do.
Can you tell us what would be normal?
Normal would be maybe 8 to 30 seconds of knocking and before we get any response. This went on for a while. We knocked for a while. Some time passed as we were knocking and it got louder and louder and louder. Then that person came out. We engaged that, talking to that guy, and then we went back to knocking some more. So it went longer. That seemed like a really long time to me.
Like a dangerous long time?
In hindsight, yes, but at the time, we didn't anticipate this happening.
Did you know, or do you know how long it took to engage with the fellow
No,
upstairs?
it didn't take a long time. The person upstairs,
Yes.
it was go back. It was loud. He finally goes back. He's like, "What are you doing?" He saw us, and then he went back in.
And then you were positioned somewhere behind these steps?
Kind of right around in here, so that I could see that doorway and I could see that doorway.
Okay, this is before the door was breached, correct?
Correct.
And everybody else was up there in that breezeway?
Yeah, most people were in the breezeway.
And did you see Detective Hankison there?
I don't remember exactly where he was standing. I know for a fact it was Mattingly, James, Lieutenant Hoover, and Detective Nobles and Detective Cosgrove, for sure. I really don't remember exactly where he was standing when all this happened.
The door was breached, Sergeant Mattingly was shot. Do you know, what did you do at that point?
Well, everybody started to come back toward me, so I backpedaled back to cover in the parking lot.
Did you see where Detective Hankison went?
He was, everybody came out of the breezeway. I don't know where none of us were up here at that point.
None of you were up where?
Up by the door at that point when everybody came out.
Okay, as soon as that shot was fired, everybody got out.
Well, there was shooting, and in the course of the shooting, everybody rolled out of there.
Do you know how many shots were fired?
Quite a few,
Do you know how long that shooting lasted?
really quick. I don't know. I have no idea.
Can't put a
I
definition on
can't put a
really
time
quick?
on it, no.
Okay. And you testified you did not see Brett Hankison fire at all, correct?
I never saw him fire a shot.
Did you see him or hear him do anything after Sergeant Mattingly was shot?
I remember he got on the radio and said that they were shooting at us with a rifle. I believe that came out. And then we all covered down and covered down on the building, the apartment, and we held it. And then when we made contact, he talked to Walker and got Walker. He got Walker to come out. He gave him directions when he came out.
Okay, when you say when we made contact, you're referring to contact with Kenneth Walker?
Correct.
And you know now if Kenneth Walker was Breonna Taylor's boyfriend at the time?
That's what I'm hearing now, yeah.
And he's the one that fired the shot, or is believed to have fired the shot?
That's what we later found.
And you just testified, what did Brett Hankison do with him?
He gave him directions as he came out.
How did he do that? Can you,
He was just giving them commands to come out, hands up, turn around, that kind of, just surrender instructions.
and meanwhile, what was everybody else doing?
Well, some people were treating Sergeant Mattingly as he was leaving, trying to get him out. And I guess that, by that point, I think he was gone. And everybody else was covering down on the building.
Okay. Can you describe the atmosphere during the period of time of that shooting?
Chaotic.
What do you mean by that?
It was a lot, like, so, you know, an officer was shot, so there were tons of police coming. We were trying to get Mattingly out.
I'm gonna interrupt you here, and I'm talking about before Mattingly was, or right when Mattingly was shot, when the shooting was occurring.
What do you mean, like, what was the atmosphere? It was
Yes.
it was a shooting, so it was a lot of gunfire going on.
Okay, can you describe, was it loud?
Yes, it was very loud.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Anything else of this witness?
No.
All right, you can step down, thank you. All right, the Commonwealth's next witness.
Sergeant Jason Vance.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Would you state your name, please?
My name is Sergeant Jason Vance.
And how are you employed?
I am currently employed with the Administrative Bureau for the Louisville Metro Police Department.
And how long have you been with the department?
Been with the department for a little over 16 years.
In 2020, how were you employed with the department?
So I spent approximately 5 years with the Public Integrity Unit. I've recently transferred from the Public Integrity Unit in the last 2 weeks. It's a unit within Louisville Metro Police that the primary function or responsibility of the unit is to investigate officer-involved shootings, but they're also tasked with investigating all crimes or alleged crimes by any Metro government employee.
Public Integrity Unit.
Correct.
And on March 13th, 2020, did you get notice of an officer-involved shooting on Springfield Drive?
I did.
And is that specifically the address 3003 Springfield Drive?
3003, yes.
And is that location in Jefferson County?
It is.
About what time did you get notice?
It was around 1 o'clock in the morning on the 13th.
What did you do at that time?
Just a routine response to an officer-involved shooting. MetroSafe Communications would communicate that each investigator within the Public Integrity Unit to respond to whatever location the officer-involved shooting occurred at, which is the same in this case. You respond, and you typically get briefed when you arrive to the location.
So you did arrive at 3003 Springfield,
Yes.
and what did you said you would get briefed. Was someone there to brief you?
Yeah, so typically the way it works is that, investigators respond not all at the same time, just from, some people live further away, just there's lots of variables involved in that. So what we do is the first PIU investigator that gets on an officer-involved shooting, they try to ascertain as much information as they possibly can, and then they're required to, as the rest of the investigators arrive to the scene, they would brief the unit as a group of people. And in most cases, the lieutenant or the commander of the Public Integrity Unit would then assign a lead, and we go on a rotation, kind of like a homicide unit rotation. And if you were next to have a critical case, then you'd be assigned as the lead, and then that person could divvy out responsibility. So they could say, I want you to do my scene, I'm going to do this, whatever. So everyone has a task to do after that briefing, and they know it.
Now, had the scene been secure since the shooting occurred?
Yes.
So there were people on scene constantly after the shooting, once patrol arrived and then SWAT cleared the apartment building or the apartment?
There was members of LMPD on scene from the moment the shooting occurred until I arrived. Yes.
Handing you a group of photographs marked Commonwealth Exhibit 70, 71, 72, 73, 75, 76. Have you had a chance, are you familiar with those photographs?
I am.
And what do they depict?
The 70 is an aerial shot of the St. Anthony Gardens community, apartment complex, community complex. And then there's an adjoining or adjacent series of apartments that are adjacent to that property.
And 71?
71 is an overall or aerial view of 3001, 3, 5, and 7 Springfield, and then the corresponding addresses south of those buildings.
And 72?
72 is a broader aerial view of St. Anthony Gardens, encompasses even further south. The complex or community, is on the side of somewhat of a hill. So it goes, if you go south, it goes further in elevation.
73?
It's an aerial view of 3003 Springfield Drive. And 74 is the 3003 Springfield Drive, and it's got identifying, it's identifying the numbers of each apartment within that building. That building is divided with south apartments and north apartments. And the north apartments would be, if you look at the opening in the building, would be the apartment doors that, as you walk into that opening, immediately face you, the first and second level.
And 75?
It is a layout of the apartment, apartment 4.
the floor plan
The floor plan, yes.
of apartment 4 and 76.
It's a layout or floor plan of apartment 3.
And those photos you have reviewed, and they fairly and accurately depict the scenes that you just described.
Yes.
Move to admit exhibits 70 through 76.
No objection.
They will be so admitted.
In addition, if you would direct your attention to the posters with laser. Those have also been marked, and you have had occasion to review these posters.
Correct.
Are those enlarged posters of the exhibits that you just testified about, 70 through 76?
Yes.
And those have been marked 70A, 71A, 72A, 73A, 74A, 75A, and 76A. And you have reviewed those previously?
Yes.
And those are the same photographs that you just reviewed in the 8x10 size?
Yeah, but it should be noted that the 8 by 10 size is going to be in width of the image. Obviously, it was going to be altered because, a viewfinder of a camera is altered when it's printed, that digital image is printed when it's printed. It's altered by the width because the 8 by 10 is not at the true size of the digital image. It's more of 11 by 12.
So it may show more on the enlarged.
Correct.
You do have the laser. So, exhibit 70A, as you were describing it previously, is the over aerial view of the entire complex
Yes.
at St. Anthony Gardens.
Correct.
And where is apartment, or building 3003?
Madison.
Yes, but ma'am, can you see, the juror, are you able to see?
We can't see it.
All right. I think we might need to slip
Let's-
that back some.
Thank you.
If need to, we can use this ruler, because we gotta be careful with our lasers being one of those shot angles like your eyes. Let's use the ruler.
About 3003.
Yes.
This section is 3001.
Okay, and that is 70A. Now, could you flip that poster over the top and tell us what 71A is showing?
It's a not as broad aerial view of St. Anthony Gardens, and immediately the adjacent area. This is 3001, 3003, and this indicates where apartment 4 is, yellow and pink.
So there are quite a few buildings in the complex.
Yes.
And go ahead and flip that exhibit over to 72A.
Another aerial view of the St. Anthony Gardens community, as you can see on the photo, it identifies 3003.
And in that exhibit, could you point out where the gate is that leads into that area? On the
Adjacent community?
gate,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a gate here. At the time this photograph was taken, there's a gate here that doesn't allow through traffic to or from St. Anthony Gardens to these adjacent apartment communities.
So you would enter from the above.
Yeah, so if you had a wider aerial view of that area, you would see that the main road comes down, and the entrance to St. Anthony Gardens is actually further south up a hill. And as the community spans out, it goes down that hill, and 3003 is the furthest north apartment building in that community.
Okay. And that is 72A?
Yes.
So go to 73A. And is that, what building are we looking at here?
3003, that's a closer, zoomed in, if you will, aerial view of that building.
And where would apartment 4 be, the entrance?
Right, well, the entrance to the opening is kind of hard to tell from this photograph, but number 4 is identified on the photograph.
And where on the photograph is the apartment 3 back, the sliding glass doors from apartment 3?
Yeah, so, again, it's kind of hard to tell. I'm assuming this is the patio from that, because there's a shadow from the photograph. But apartment 3 is immediately north of apartment 4. They have a firewall that separates them, that's it.
74A, the next photo.
That's a street view, if you will, of apartment, 3001 and 3003 Springfield. And the photograph is, notates the location of each numbered apartment, 4 being the one here, identified as number 4. 3 is immediately north of 4. 4 encompasses these 2 windows and this patio, glass sliding patio.
And go ahead and flip over to 75A. And what is,
This is a floor plan of the community apartments for apartment 4, for the apartment 4 floor plan.
so that's the floor plan for apartment 4, the subject of the search warrant.
Correct.
And where is the entry, the front door there, to that apartment?
Yeah, so the common entry point would be the front door, obviously. It has one common entry point, 3 more possible entry points. Sliding glass door here from the patio that's kind of subdivided from the sidewalk, but it's on this, it's almost in the same plane concrete. Then you have the 2 windows in each bedroom.
That would be the parking lot below that, below the poster would be the parking lot.
Yes, so these 2 bedrooms are these 2 windows here. This bedroom encompasses this portion of the brick. It's kind of hard to tell from the way that apartment building, the photograph shows, but because of the siding versus the brick. But this window is not so much centered in the bedroom.
This is 75A. And again, the front door to apartment 4 is where?
It's in the opening, the common area opening of the 2-story apartment building.
So go ahead and point it out on the right there.
This indicates the entry doors.
Okay. And then 76A,
That is a floor plan for apartment 3. This indicates where the concrete patio is, with the glass sliding door. And in relation to 4, so this entry door is here. This entry door at 3 is basically perpendicular to entry door 4, indicated in this layout. So entry door 4 for apartment 4 would be perpendicular to this door. But this is an apartment layout immediate north of apartment 4.
and where's the common wall?
Common wall would be indicated as in the thicker black, indicating that's a wall. It's typically called a firewall because they try to, when they build structure like this, they try to, prevent fires from expanding from one apartment to the next.
Okay, you can have a seat. Commonwealth would move to admit the exhibits 70A, 71A, 72A, 73A, 74A, 75A and 76A.
No objection.
All right, they'll be so admitted.
Now, what did you do after arriving on scene and being briefed by other PIU that had previously gotten there? What did you do?
One of the first things that I dealt with was to get people out of the scene. You know, as most every officer involved shooting, you know, slowing things down for officers is important. And what I mean by that is slowing emotions down, and people coming in and out of the scene, preventing that from happening, identifying evidence immediately and trying to preserve its position. And that's part of like preventing evidence from being altered, not intentionally, but unintentionally. So that was one of the first things that the first sergeant, because in the public integrity unit at this time of the shooting, every investigator was a commanding officer. And that was Sergeant Lee's initial job was to do that as well and to ascertain as much information as he could. So when I arrived, that's one of the things I started helping him with. Sergeant Anthony Wilder, another sergeant in the public integrity unit, assisted me with that. We repositioned some uniformed officers to points that, you know, we wanted to keep people out of. But we're still trying to assess what happened. So we had apartment 4 and we also had apartment 3. And we also had an issue of like, we wanted to make sure that no one else was hit in other apartments. So we had to go to other apartments, or not necessarily me, but I assisted in making contact in apartment 3 just because it was obvious that ballistic or projectiles had entered that apartment. So I made contact along with Sergeant Roof and Sergeant Lane with the occupants of that apartment.
Now, did you learn that Ms. Taylor had been, that she was deceased?
Yes. I actually got, like I said, a further briefing on scene from Sergeant Wilder, because Sergeant Lee left almost, him leaving the scene coincided with me arriving in some
Okay, so-
duration.
So you did learn that?
Yes.
And did you actually, on scene, speak to Ms. Taylor's family?
I did. While we were trying to get crime scene unit technicians and just resources to the scene to start, you know, our responsibility, which is in documenting what happened. I was notating vehicles that were parked in front of the buildings on that side, on the 3003 side. And I was alerted actually by an LMPD officer that members of the Walker family were to the east of the scene. So I made contact with them, and in the process of speaking with the Walker family, they had contacted Brianna's mom by phone, and she was to report. You know, she was on her way to the scene. That contact with the Walker family was audio recorded. I went back to documenting the vehicles, and when Ms. Taylor's mom, Ms. Palmer, arrived to the scene, I went back to that same location where the Walker family was at, and, you know, I had a tough conversation with her about, you know, the condition of her daughter. So, and there was a lot, you know, obviously there was some emotions involved in that. But we explained to her kind of what the process was. We gave her the name of the coroner, who's going to oversee the case. We offered chaplain. We have deputy chaplains that are volunteers for our police department from almost every faith. We offered shelter because it was kind of chilly that night. We have canopies. Crime scene unit has canopies we could have provided them shelter with. But there was no doubt, it was clear that Brianna was still in that apartment, deceased. It was a very hard conversation.
Once the crime scene unit arrived, then did you begin processing apartment 4 and
Yes.
collecting evidence?
So not immediately processing inside, but we began our scene processing with the exterior scene, for obvious reasons. I mean, that's a scene that you can less control, if you will, because you have people living in a community that have to go to work, they have obligations, they have to leave, and you can't necessarily, unless it's directly gonna alter evidence, you would not necessarily be able to stop them from leaving, going to work and whatnot. But most everybody that I had contact with was willing to cooperate in any way. So,
Once the crime scene unit arrived, there were photos taken, exterior and interior.
yes, so,
Have you had a chance to review those photos before coming to testify today, which have been marked Commonwealth's Exhibit 1 through 69?
yes,
Gone through each and every one of those.
yes.
And do they fairly and accurately depict the scene, both exterior and interior, as it was that early morning hours of March 13th, 2020?
Yes.
So
Would you like me to look at each one of them?
look through them quickly.
Yes.
Okay. If you would now turn your attention to the screen behind you, and with the pointer, do you have the pointer there? And this is Exhibit 1. Would you explain what we see here?
So this is apartment 4, and this is the opening to the first floor apartments and the second floor apartments. There's this, you can't see it in this photo, but there's a white Sequoia, Toyota Sequoia, that's belongs to the brother of the person that occupies this apartment 8.
That you later learned was Mr. Sarpe?
Yes, Aaron Sarpe, he was the civilian involved in this.
Okay, go ahead to Exhibit 2. Exhibit 2,
Just a clear picture of the same picture. I believe the street light may have turned on, or she may have changed her photography. But the same 3003 Springfield, this indicates apartment 4 right here.
and still seeing the Sequoia over on the right-hand side,
Correct.
the grill of the Sequoia. So Exhibit 3,
So this is a further east photo. This is the white Sequoia that belongs to Aaron Sarpe. This is Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly's police vehicle. not his typically assigned police vehicle, but the one he was operating that night. And obviously, this is medical care equipment. And this is apartment 4.
And so the vehicles had not been moved. It was still a crime scene.
No, and actually, Mr. Sarpy was just there to get his young daughter, and he got a ride from someone else and agreed to allow, and he actually even gave us the keys, allowed us to just kind of
Yeah.
deal with his vehicle, whatever we need to do with it.
I see. Exhibit 4?
This is an east to west view. This is apartment 4 here. This is the Roto-Rooter van's actually Mr. Sarpy's brother's, Stanley. His brother is his business van. And this is Sergeant Mattingly's vehicle, police vehicle. Mr. Sarpy's Toyota. This is a LMPD marked unit. It's the marked unit that was inside the scene when we got there. And this, again, this is 3003 apartment 4 right behind this van.
Go on to Exhibit 5.
This is apartment 4. This is how we observed the entry door into apartment 4 when we got there. And this is apartment 3. As you can tell, they're perpendicular to each other.
And now, once more, would you step over to the easel and flip over from Exhibit 76A and see if that is Exhibit 5A? No, you would be going forward. You would flip that over. And is that Exhibit 5A?
Yes.
That's the same photo that we see on the screen?
Yes, and as you can see, it shows more of the.
So we would move to admit Exhibit 5A at this time.
No objection.
It'll be so admitted.
Go on to Exhibit 6, please.
So this is a gray truck with a bed lid, an acrylic bed lid or fiberglass bed lid on top of it. And these are like little orange arrows that indicate that there's ballistic evidence present. And this is an overall before we put markers down, which is one of the first or the next initial step in scene processing.
So those are bullet, as you later found out, casings,
Spent bullet casings, yes.
spent casings. And point out where the sliding glass doors are in this photo.
Yeah, so the sliding glass door, part 4, is right here in front of this truck with that lid on.
Exhibit 7.
So that gray truck is going to be immediately here outside the view of that photo. This is apartment 4, that's the sliding glass door, and this is the window to that south bedroom
With bullet holes.
with bullet defects
In
in
it.
it, yes.
Exhibit 8, please.
This is a photograph of that sliding glass door. It has bullet defect in it, not just in the window, but also in the screen material and the interior furnishings like the Venetian blinds, vertical blinds, and the curtains on the inside.
Exhibit 10.
It's a closer view of the
9,
same.
I'm sorry.
It's a closer view of the same glass sliding door. It's hard to tell in this photo, but this screen material actually has very defined defect in it. Looking through that, you have broken glass, and then the vertical blinds and the curtain, interior curtain.
Exhibit 10.
This is the opening to the apartment 3003 portion of that building. Apartment 4 would be right here behind these stairs. This is apartment 3, and this is material or Christmas decorations that were at one point underneath the staircase.
And under the staircase is there a piece of evidence that's got some red under that third
Yes,
stair?
this is what the criminal interdiction members use to breach or get the door open with force. It's called a ram. It's got, I'm not sure what it weighs, but it's heavy and it's used to breach doors.
Exhibit 11.
This is a narrower photograph of the same opening, breezeway, if you want to call it. It's a tote that I believe had those Christmas decorations in it that got moved around as a hat, and there, which you really can't tell in this photo, but there's ballistic evidence, there's spent casings and whatnot in this photo as well. This is apartment 3. Apartment 4 is just out of the view of the photograph.
Exhibit 12?
This is a closer view of the same area. Again, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's numerous spent casings all through this opening, and this is apartment 4.
13?
It's a close-up of the door and the ram, breaching tool, if you will. Again, you'll start seeing more identifiable spent casings in this area.
Exhibit 14?
This is apartment 3, 2, and 1, showing this the rest of a more closer up view photograph of that area. Apartment 4 immediately to the east.
Exhibit 15?
So as you come into apartment 4, immediately to the left is a dining room with a small kitchen area. And this area right here, just outside of the view of this photograph, is a hallway that leads to the south and east bedroom of that apartment layout.
And where's the common wall with apartment 3?
This is common wall here, runs all down through here.
And could you point out where the door was breached, where the ram hit?
Yeah, so it was hit on the opposite side of the hinge, which is the way law enforcement they breach doors for obvious reasons. If you hit it on the hinge side, you're not gonna get it open.
Right. Exhibit 16?
It's a closer up of that door, and it shows the damage that the door sustained from the breaching tool.
17?
This is an exterior, and as we forward in time, obviously daylight, the sun came up, we started having, where we could actually see and identify more things. And so we start putting down markers to identify certain pieces of evidence and identify general areas where evidence exists.
And markers 1 and 3, we'll see close-ups of them. Those are, let's just move on, we'll see close-ups of them. Let's move to exhibit 18.
So this is that same gray truck. This is apartment 4, and now these markers where you saw earlier, you saw the orange little rubber arrows. Now we're putting down markers identifying ballistic evidence or spent casings in the areas where the markers are located.
19.
This is a photograph south to north, and as you can see now, the markers indicate where evidence is at. And unlike the other photographs, you couldn't really tell where the spent casings were or other evidence. Now the markers are identifying that evidence we're speaking of.
And 20.
This is the truck as well, that gray truck, and then this truck here, the van, is that Roto-Rooter van. This is a closer up of that series of ballistic evidence, spent casings, including one under the tire here that we were talking about. And for perspective, the white Toyota Sequoia is just south of this view of the photograph, and then Sergeant Mattingly's police vehicle is just south of it.
Now, each of those markers, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 9 you said was under the tire?
Correct.
And each of those markers marking a casing, later testing proved to be fired from Hankison's gun.
Correct.
21.
This is a photograph west to east, again identifying that Roto-Rooter van,
With the same markers.
displaying the same marker numbers, sequential numbers.
22.
So this is markers identifying other evidence. This is a spent magazine from one of the involved officers. Marker 1, I believe, was a spent casing. I can't tell in that
As
photograph.
well as marker 3.
as well as marker 3, yes.
Those casings as well, later testing showed to be fired from Hankison's gun.
Correct. They were federal brand spent 40 caliber casings.
Exhibit 23.
Another picture of, or a photograph from south to north, showing on the opposite side of that gray truck, which would be the west side of that truck, if you will. Apartment 4 is up here. That sidewalk that's right immediately south of the glass sliding door.
And 24.
Same view, just expanded up and further north, showing the perspective or positioning in relation to that sliding glass door. These markers.
And 4 is another casing.
It is. It is a spent 40 caliber federal casing.
That was later found to be fired from defendant Hankison's gun.
Correct.
25.
This is a close-up view of that spent casing. Identified as
one.
marker 1.
26.
Spent casing, identifying marker 4.
27.
Spent casing, federal casing, identifying marker 3.
And 28.
Spent casing, identifying it with 4.
And 29.
It's a spent casing that was right under that front right tire of that Roto-Rooter van, identifying it as marker number 9.
And 30.
Marker 10, spent federal casing.
And 31.
So these were casings that, that we identified as casings that were obviously weathered. You know, in an urban community, people celebrate on 4th of July and New Year's Eve, they fire weapons. And we don't have no way of determining that that's when that occurred, but it's not, the reason why I bring it up, it's not uncommon in apartment communities to find spent ballistic ammunition, in my experience. So because this was such a vast had so much ballistic evidence in the scene, we determined that there was no way we could not collect it with the evidence that we were collecting in this shooting, but did not believe it was associated to this shooting because of the obvious physical traits of the casings.
Okay. Now that is Exhibit 31. If you would also step over to the posters once more and flip over that one, which I believe is 5A. Now, is this Exhibit 19A?
Yes.
And you've already testified about Exhibit 19. And is that the same photo as 19?
Yes,
And is this one, 31A, the same as the one currently on the screen?
it is.
Okay, we would move to admit Exhibit 19A and 31A.
No objection.
They'll be so admitted.
Now, let's continue on to Exhibit 32.
It's a not so close, I mean, it's a overall picture, if you will. It shows in relation to marker 11 and 12, that is the south bedroom window with obvious, it's kind of hard to tell in this photo, but there's obvious bullet defect in the glass, and there's a defect down here in the aluminum siding and substrate material, building material.
And again, those markers, are those you said the weathered material or casings that you were not related to the shooting?
Yeah, because of their obvious physical characteristics, it didn't appear that they were related, but that we needed to collect them as evidence because, you know, obviously we're not scientists and we can't do examinations on scene, so to the abundance of caution, we collected it as evidence.
33?
This is the number 4, or apartment 4 sliding glass door. This is that sidewalk that leads to the opening, common area opening to that portion of the building. And there was casings in here identified by the markers.
In 34?
This is a photograph west to east, and as you can see, that this portion of 3001 was secured with police tape all the way across the parking lot to the next south building.
Where's the police tape?
Right there in the picture, it goes across the sidewalk here. It actually extended across the parking lot over to the immediately south apartment building, across the street from 3001 and 3.
Exhibit 35?
This is the common area opening of that part, the 3003 portion of that building. Apartment 4 here, 3, 2, and 1, just showing the overall with the markers down. Staircase going to the second floor of that building in relation to the sliding glass doors and the other weathered casings, if you will, on that handicap access ramp or sidewalk in relation to the apartment 4.
Exhibit 37?
Closer up of the markers within that common area, including the tote. And it's typical that CSU techs would be, they would take these wide range photographs and then they get closer and closer and closer to kind of show perspective of the evidence.
And if you would point out marker 37 up there.
Marker 37 right here.
And marker 37, is that place occupied by a bullet?
Yes.
And that bullet later designated by the department as item 65, which we'll see a photo of later.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing. So with CSU reports or Louisville Metro Police Department CSU reports, you have a marker number, you have an exhibit number, and then if it's sent to the lab, you'd have a lab number. So it's this one piece of evidence can have 3 separate three numbers, and sometimes it's confusing. I mean, sometimes I have to lay it out for myself because I get confused.
And so that marker 37, later numbered LMPD number 65, was tested by both Kentucky State Police and the FBI.
Yeah, so initially this projectile was always believed to be the projectile that struck Sergeant Mattingly, that went through his leg. We have a forensic report within the investigation that kind of shows the trajectory of that projectile in his leg, and it was consistent with the ammunition that we believe that the gun that fired it. So,
And it was ultimately identified, that bullet, as having been fired from the 9mm found under the bed in the south bedroom.
correct, not through serology, but through ballistic
Ballistics.
examination.
Okay. Did you find any defects in the foyer or anywhere else indicative of automatic fire or ARs or long rifles or anything like that?
So this is the west wall of that opening, apartment 1 and 2. There was no defect observed in this plastic siding at all.
What about inside the apartment?
No defect. No defect from any projectiles traveling east to west,
Traveling out the door,
out the door, and in direction east to west.
and that is the only bullet, that item, or marker 37, that was found that was identified as having been fired from that gun in the apartment under that bed.
Yes,
Exhibit 38,
spent casings.
And the RAM again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at that. Yes. Markers identifying spent casings and the breaching tool, the RAM, in relation to apartment 4.
And 39.
The lock mechanism or the assembly for the door identified as marker 22.
40.
Shows the other markers closer to, this is apartment 1. Apartment 37 is that projectile we just talked about. And then it just shows the relationship in that of the markers to the apartments. Remember, it's 2, 3, and it's 4.
And these were all these other markers, 26, 27, 28, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. Were those placed there to show where casings were retrieved?
Yes, where spent casings were located at.
Spent casings?
Yes.
And did later testing all show that all of those spent casings were fired from the guns of Mattingly and Cosgrove?
Yes.
Exhibit 41.
Entry door to apartment 4. Obviously, there's a cell phone there, marker 33, and then spent casings in the remaining marker numbers.
Including 39,
Yes,
also a spent casing.
correct.
42,
Marker 36 shows the strike plate of the lock assembly or door assembly of the entry door to apartment 4.
and 43,
This is a closer up of marker 37. This is the projectile that went through Sergeant Mattingly's leg.
and 44.
This is the opening to entry door to apartment 4, showing the perspective of these markers, the cell phones, and the marker 39 and the foyer of that door opening.
And that's a casing at 39,
Correct.
which was identified as either Mattingly or Cosgrove's.
Correct.
And 45.
This is the south bedroom window, showing the defect in the glass and defect in the aluminum substrate or, trim, whatever, of the window. And each defect has a scale in it, showing its size.
46.
This is a projectile that was located, it's marker 47, was located in the south bedroom dresser.
That was on the other side of the window we just saw.
Yeah, yeah, so it's, if you went through that window, it'd be there's a dresser on the wall that separates the south and east bedrooms. And that projectile, there's defect on the front drawer of that dresser, and that projectile was found just in that top left drawer.
Uh, 47.
Marker 47 is.
Well, and also, we're now going to exhibit 47.
I'm sorry. This is the glass sliding door, and this is a closer up photo. And some of the glass had fallen too, so it makes it easier to see in the photograph by this time. Is that this net or the screen material showing the different defect in the screen material with the scales next to it. And just for perspective, this goes into the living room area, apartment 4, traveling south to north.
How many bullets were determined to have been fired through the sliding glass door into the dining room, either the dining room of apartment 4, the common wall of apartment 4, or into and out of apartment 3?
I'm sorry, I
How
didn't
many
hear the first
bullets
part.
total went through this sliding glass doors?
5.
5. All of which later testing showed were fired from Detective Hankison's gun.
Correct.
Exhibit 48.
Here's the sliding glass door again. This is that gray truck we talked about, and just showing perspective. And this is actually a photograph we took before we got to where we were putting down markers in relation to that south bedroom we just talked about.
$49.
This is the hallway. When you come into that apartment and the door swings open, you are immediately, you see immediately down that hallway. And this is Miss Taylor in the back of the hallway. We'll get to this, the layout, but this wall, there's a cutout, or not cutout, but it kind of recesses back to where there's an offset for that opening to that south bedroom, and you walk in. And then the master bedroom, if you will, the east bedroom, is that opening we can barely see here. And there's a bathroom and a utility closet to the left here.
So the south bedroom that we saw is to the right
Yes,
of Ms. Taylor.
correct.
The doorway
The
is to
doorway.
the right.
There's an offset, so the hallway comes down here, and because there's a closet in that south, may I stand up? Ma'am? Can I stand up? Because there's a closet in that bedroom, there has to be an offset to allow for that closet in that bedroom, which is why the way it's set up this way. So you would have to turn right and then be, maybe a couple feet, 3 feet difference as you would come into the opening of that bedroom.
And where is the doorway to the east bedroom, which is Ms. Taylor's?
You can barely see it, but you can see the striker plate there for the door knob assembly. But that's it right there.
And then there's a wall there at the end.
Yeah. So at the end of the hallway, on the opposite side of that wall, there's a closet that is in that east bedroom.
Okay. Exhibit 50.
This is a photograph from north to south, taken from if you were standing next to the dining room table, looking towards that glass patio door. And this is the living room area.
And I misspoke. This is 51. I think 50 was removed because I believe it was another photo that we decided to remove. So this is 51. Now, those drapes, on the other, or if you pull the drapes back, the vertical blinds are there?
Yes, there's vertical blinds, and some of them had fallen from the bullet defect or damage that the bullets caused, projectiles caused.
52?
So this is flip the other way from south to north. This is obviously the door, the opening to apartment 4, and this is that common wall between 4 and 3. And here's that dining room table we spoke about, and then the love seat here, TV, and then on the back side outside of the photograph would be the glass patio door.
53?
Same. This is with the door closed or almost closed, with scaling, showing defect in that common wall. Defect on the dining room table from bullet defect or from projectiles.
So how many bullet holes there can we see?
There's 3.
And one on the chair, the defect?
Yes. And then later on, we'll see that there's a projectile laying on the ground next to the dining room table.
And exhibit 54?
These are closer ups, and then in this photograph, you see another additional bullet defect or projectile path through that common wall.
So that accounts for the 5 shots through the sliding door.
Correct.
One that hit the chair that we saw, and then this one above the chair rail there. Could you point that one out? That's the second one, and then the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And this is the common wall into apartment 3.
This is a common wall from 4. This is the apartment 4 side, and the projectiles would have passed through the common wall into the apartment 3 north of apartment 4.
Exhibit 55.
Some of the damage caused by the projectiles on the dining room table.
56.
This is a view outside of that glass, standing on the patio. The glass had, by this point, had fallen, and it's a view inside the apartment showing defect on that common wall.
As if you're standing in front of the sliding doors.
Correct, yes.
Taking this photo. And where's the front door then?
Front door's here.
In the hallway?
Hallway is here. It's kind of hard to tell because the walls are all white, but that's the hallway.
The hallway that leads to the bedrooms at the end.
It's the hallway, yes.
57.
57 is that dresser drawer in south bedroom showing the projectile, and this is the damage that projectile caused when it entered the south bedroom window, and it you know, that's where it was found.
That projectile was later determined to have been fired from Detective Hankison's gun.
Yes.
Exhibit 58.
This is a projectile that's found in the utility closet, just north of that hallway, where it penetrated the drywall or substrate and landed and rested right there where we found it.
And also later determined to have been fired from Detective Hankison's gun.
Correct.
59.
This is the south bedroom. So it's kind of hard to tell, but you can tell there's an offset here. This is, if you were standing in the hallway looking into the south bedroom, this is the black, like blacked out curtains with blinds behind it. And this is that dresser that we talked about with the projectile in that top left drawer. The reason why this bed is up like this is because when SWAT came in to clear the apartment for threats, they identified the weapon, the 9mm weapon we spoke about earlier, and they kept it up like that so it would be visible to investigators as they came into the apartment.
Would you point out the window there, and that's the other side of that, the outside window with the bullet defects?
Yes.
And so that's a shade or a curtain?
A curtain with blinds on the backside of it. So there's blinds immediately on the window, if you will, and then there's like, that's like a fabric curtain, or you know, it may actually even just been this fabric that was pinned to kind of black out the room for light purposes.
And then were there bullet defects in the blinds
Yes.
and the curtain?
Yes.
Exhibit 60.
This is a projectile was found in the bathroom. It's a fiberglass insert bathtub tub and shower combo. It just was sitting here on this soap shelf. You know, projectiles are, you know, it's weird how you find things, you're just, how did it end up there? I mean, of all places. But as it travels through material, it changes in velocity, it changes in shape, and it's unpredictable.
And that bullet later determined to have been fired from Hankison's gun.
Correct.
The bathroom being across on the other side of the hallway from the south bedroom.
Correct.
Exhibit 61.
This is that gun we spoke about. This is the bed. It's been propped up in the south bedroom.
And what type of gun is that? Pistol is that?
It's a Glock 9mm.
Exhibit 62.
This is that same window that had bullet defect from the exterior into that dresser when we found a projectile in that top left drawer. Beds up, guns on the floor. Just shows the curtain, if you will, or material that's covering the blinds of the window.
And 63.
That is a sequential bullet defect from the window to the drywall. So what we did was, and you'll see this maybe in later pictures where we identify them in numerically in letters. So we correspond the defect in the window to the defect in the drywall, and we did that using a laser. And we use a laser to go through the window. We can't use rods because you can't put rods in glass. You can tell by sequence in glass, but in this case, the shot pattern of the glass was expanded to the point where it didn't alter the glass, like it didn't collapse the window. So each shot was identifiable, and the laser identified the corresponding or sequential defect
Coming from the window.
from the window. So
This
it gave you a trajectory.
And that's the door to the south bedroom that goes into the
Yeah, so
hall.
it's the window, south, north. This is a door goes into the hallway, so it's going south to north.
64.
It's marker 44, it's the Glock 9mm handgun.
And that was obviously collected as evidence.
Yes.
65.
This was a handwritten note that we found that was correspondence between Breonna Taylor and Jamarcus Glover.
66.
It's the same envelope showing the correspondence between the two parties.
Found in the apartment.
Correct.
67.
These were bills in Jamarcus Glover's name from these companies
Found in the apartment.
found in the apartment.
68.
Marker 40, it's a fragment of a projectile. And it's the projectile that struck the dining room table.
That we saw earlier that hit the chair and then was found on the floor.
Yes, right on the floor, right next to the table.
So it never made, its final resting place was apartment 4.
Correct.
69.
This is a further back view or wider expanded view of marker 40. It's really hard to tell where that fragment is, but it shows a relationship between the table and the marker number.
And the fragment was later testing revealed to have been fired from Hankison's gun.
Correct.
We have, and you said that contact was made with the residents of apartment 3 and photographs were taken by the crime scene unit. We have already heard testimony from Cody Etherton and seen the majority of those photos, but there are 3 of those photos that I'd like for you to look at. Handing you what's marked Commonwealth's Exhibit 106, 107, 108.
So 106 is a photograph of the living room area of apartment 3, showing obvious defect to that glass glass sliding door. Exhibit 107 is the defect that the dining room table in apartment 3 sustained from projectiles traveling through that common wall. And then Exhibit 108 is just a further back view of the same table showing the perspective of Exhibit 107 in relation to that dining room table.
And the bullet is laying on the table
Correct.
in front of the computer.
Correct.
And those photos fairly and accurately depict the scene as it was early that morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Would move to admit Exhibits 106, 107, and 108.
Objection.
They'll be so admitted. Did you move to admit 1 through 69 minus Exhibit 50, or were you not ready to do
Now,
that
if I
yet?
didn't move to admit 1 through 49 and 51 through 69.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, they will be so admitted. Counsel, would you approach for a moment, please? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a pretty long day, heard a lot of testimony. I think this might be a good time for us to go ahead and recess for the evening. We'll return tomorrow morning at 9:30 to hear further testimony in the case. We had talked with you about going to the scene. The weather's not looking very good for tomorrow. It looks like there's going to be a lot of rain, so we're going to hold off until Friday, just in case you all wanted to make some plans in terms of going out there. You will be transported by the Sheriff's Department. I was talking about in terms of what shoes you might want to wear, what you might want to bring with you to go to the scene. So we'll probably go there Friday afternoon rather than going tomorrow. All right, so I will see you tomorrow morning at 9:30. Please remember the separation admonition.
All rise for the recording jury, and did you leave?
And you can step down if you'd like, and then we'll see you back tomorrow. Please don't discuss your testimony with anyone since you are still on the witness stand.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, in terms of whether we're going to have the trial on Monday, I guess it depends on how far, did we get as far as you had hoped that we would get today? Are we already behind?
We're actually just a little bit behind. There were two very short witnesses that would testify after Lieutenant Vance. So after Lieutenant Vance, no one else will be anywhere close to that.
Okay,
He is the very longest by far.
all right. Well, then maybe can we just make that decision tomorrow regarding Monday? And we'll hopefully have a better sense of how we're moving along with the witnesses. All right, anything else?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, see you tomorrow morning.